Hello, my fellow night travelers. Tonight, we begin our quiet journey eastward, far from stone castles and fog-draped hills, across a landscape unlike any you've known. But before we set out, if you'd like, feel free to pause for a moment and share in the comments where you're listening from, and what hour of the night it is where you are. Wherever you are, in a quiet bedroom in Toronto, or perhaps tucked into a corner of a night train rolling through Tokyo, thank you for joining me. Now allow your mind to settle. Loosen your shoulders. Let your thoughts grow slow and soft, like footsteps in dry grass. Because where we're going, the world stretches wide and low, and the sky seems close enough to touch. We're stepping onto the great Mongolian steppe. It doesn't announce itself with grandeur. There are no jagged peaks, no towering forests. Instead, it offers something subtler, and to some, more unnerving. An endlessness. An openness so vast, so unbroken, that it leaves no place to hide from the wind, or from yourself. There are no roads. Only direction. No landmarks, only memory. To the west, a line of hills may shimmer beneath the morning sun. To the east, the land folds into mist, blurring what is near and what is far. The grasses grow low here, burnt gold and faded green, soft in the breeze, brittle underfoot. Even in summer, the air carries a crisp bite. Dry, with the scent of dust and distant herds. And when you walk across this earth, your footsteps leave little trace, just a faint press, easily swallowed by wind or time. It is a beautiful place. But it does not care whether you find it beautiful. It does not offer comfort. It offers space. And space, here, is a kind of test. To the Mongols, the horizon was not a limit. It was an invitation. To ride, to vanish, to return. For them, the land did not divide. It connected. But for you, for most of us, the steppe is disorienting. No walls to lean on. No trees to mark a path. Only sky above, and grass beneath. And in between, the quiet hum of distance. This is where it begins. Not with a battle. Not with a crown. But with a stretch of land so wide and so bare, it asks you to listen. To slow down. To feel the shape of the earth beneath your feet, and the breath of ancient wind on your skin. You are not lost. But you are very small. And that, here, is perfectly normal. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Let your thoughts quiet just a little more. And now listen, not to the room you're in, but to something much older. A wind, faint and constant. Not a storm. Not a gust. Just a breath that's been blowing for thousands of years. Here on the steppe, the wind is not weather. It is a presence. It does not rush or roar. It whispers. It threads its way through the grass, pulls at the cuffs of your robe, stirs the manes of sleeping horses. It speaks no language you understand, and yet, it always feels like it's saying something. When you first arrive here, drawn by story or summoned by command, you'll notice the wind almost immediately. You'll pull your scarf tighter. You'll lift your collar. You'll try to turn your back to it. But the truth is, there is no turning away. The wind on the steppe is not a visitor. It lives here. And you, well, you are the visitor. It's an old wind. It has moved over this same soil since long before there were armies or nations or even names. It has blown across the bones of deer and wolves, over the fires of small families breaking bread under a blanket of stars, and over the heavy hooves of 1,000 warriors riding east. It is dry, but not bitter. Cool, even in the sun. And though it stings your cheeks at first, over time it numbs more than it hurts. You stop feeling the sharpness. You just feel awake. For the Mongol soldier, the wind is not an enemy. It's an old companion. It shapes their days and scours their sleep. It carries the scent of distant camps and the sound of another rider approaching. It reminds them, constantly, that the world is wider than they are. Sometimes it shifts. One moment it brushes from the west, bringing the smell of warm smoke. The next, it curls down from the north, sharp with ice and memories of far-off snows. And at night, when the sky spills over with stars and the fires have burned low, the wind turns colder. Not cruel. Just honest. It does not sing lullabies. It does not hush for sleep. It keeps moving, tracing the lines of your face as you lie beneath the open sky. You might dream of home, of walls and stillness. But the wind doesn't care for homes. It loves the wide places, the unnamed places. To live here, to ride here, is to accept the wind. Not as something to battle, or block out, or conquer, but as something you share breath with. Something you come to understand not through thought, but through quiet. In time, you will stop noticing it. Not because it's gone, but because you've changed. You've grown quieter too. You've learned to walk as if the grass beneath you matters. You've learned to listen as the wind does, to everything, all at once. And when you finally fall asleep, nestled beside your horse, your saddle beneath your head, it will still be there, tracing the soft edge of your ear, whispering the old songs of the steppe. Not to frighten you, not to soothe you, only to remind you. This land remembers everything, and the wind never sleeps. If you open your eyes now, only in your mind, no need to stir from bed, you'll see no marble temples or towering forests. No bright banners flapping in the breeze. The steppe does not dazzle. It does not try to impress. Its beauty is subtle, patient, earned. These are not the colors of a postcard. They are the muted tones of endurance. Faded and honest, like the worn leather of a saddle or the calloused palm of a soldier. The earth here is not black or red or gold. It is a soft, dusty brown, powdered like flour beneath the hooves of passing horses. When it rains, rarely, it darkens to a rich clay, clinging to your boots and robes. But in the dry months, it crumbles at a touch, leaving fine traces on every fold of fabric, every line of skin. The grasses stretch endlessly in hues of dull green and yellowed straw. In the wind, they shimmer like water. Not the bright, chlorophyll green of a European meadow, no. Here, the green is tired, sun-bleached, seasoned by wind and drought. It does not shout. It simply endures. Every now and then, a patch of blue wildflowers appears, small, fragile, and low to the ground. They offer no fragrance, no grand display. But if you lean in close, you'll see them trembling in the wind, delicate against the bones of this ancient land.
While most 8-year-olds are sounding out letters or chasing friends at recess, Leah moves through her days in silence, repairing broken radios, sketching circuit diagrams in a worn-out notebook, and riding the bus with her mother to a tech giant where she quietly waits as her mother cleans. No one notices Leah. No one sees her. No one but one. When a cyber attack cripples the entire company, it's not the engineers or executives who grasp what's going on, it's Leah. And when she softly asks to try something, everything begins to change. How does a child the world overlooks become the one who saves it? And what happens when a powerful CEO is forced to see someone he's always ignored? Stay with us as we explore how brilliance can thrive in silence, and how being seen can change everything. Leah always walked 6 steps behind her mother, not out of obedience, but because she liked watching how her mother moved through spaces that weren't meant for her. Her mother never rushed, never looked up, never pretended she belonged among the marble and glass halls of Virion Technologies. She was invisible by choice. Leah had learned early on that invisibility could be a kind of strength, especially in places you weren't supposed to exist. She clutched her frayed backpack tightly, careful not to let the broken zipper catch her hoodie. Inside were her most treasured things, a notebook, a broken digital watch, and a cracked USB drive that hadn't worked in years, but that she still couldn't let go of. They entered through the employee entrance. The security guard didn't glance at Leah, he never did. Her mother muttered, 39. They both knew what that meant. Same floor, same shift. Leah didn't ask questions. She peeled off and sat in her usual spot, a cushioned bench tucked in a lobby corner. Her legs swung gently. She pulled out her notebook, flipping past pages filled with circuit doodles and faux command lines, and began sketching again. It was her favorite part of the day, when she could pretend she belonged here too. By the time her mother disappeared behind the service elevators, Leah was deep into designing an imaginary motherboard, one she pictured communicating wirelessly with phones. Her pencil scratched across the paper, tracing the logic in her mind. She barely noticed the footsteps, the sharp click of heels, the murmur of meetings, or the snapping open of tablet cases. All of it faded. What mattered was the idea, this wireless device that understood broken signals. She'd seen something like it once on a YouTube video she shouldn't have watched. She barely remembered it, but the concept had stuck. She didn't just draw the hardware now, she imagined its code. Symbols only she could read. Numbers and letters shaped into a secret alphabet. And then, mid-sentence, mid-function name, the lights flickered. She paused. Blinked. Then, the lobby screens went black, every single one, like a room full of eyes suddenly shutting. Leah stayed perfectly still. Around her, murmurs turned into concerned voices. Phones were pulled out. Some people shouted. One word rose above the rest, breach. The mood shifted instantly. A man near reception slammed his tablet on the counter. What do you mean we're locked out? He snapped into his earpiece. A woman dashed across the floor, urgently muttering something about a remote command failsafe. Leah didn't know what her job was, but the way she moved, her confident voice, her tailored suit, made others follow her without question. The pristine building was unraveling. Leah didn't move. She knew better. The moment someone noticed you, they remembered to ask you to leave. So she watched, quiet, wide-eyed, absorbing it all. Near the elevators, a group of men were already pointing fingers. One mentioned a kernel override. Another hissed something about a malware vector. Malware, Leah knew that one. She'd read about it. Watched demos of simulated attacks online. She didn't fully understand the company's infrastructure, but the fear in their voices, the layers of jargon, she could read what was really happening. She wasn't guessing. She was observing. Then, someone muttered, "This can't be happening." Not today. She glanced up at the large screen above reception, still black. Her eyes narrowed. What's today? A young man with spiked hair and a blazer 2 sizes too big was pacing near the windows, muttering into his phone. He's going to kill us. This was our biggest client pitch of the year. We're dead. Leah quickly jotted down the words client presentation next to her sketch. She didn't know exactly why, but it felt important. Their panic, it wasn't normal. This wasn't just a system crash. Something had been targeted. She listened more intently. The receptionist mentioned someone had tried rebooting the local servers. Nothing. Another man said they'd pinged external DNS. Still locked out. Leah tapped her pencil against the notebook's edge. No one seemed to actually understand where the failure began. They were reacting, running through the usual steps and finding every door sealed shut. She didn't speak. But on a fresh page, she started to outline what she would do. First, isolate the breach point, internal or external. Then, run a diagnostic shell, scan traffic for anomalies. She wasn't sure she could fix it. But one thing became clear, they couldn't. The realization struck her harder than expected. All these adults, suits, badges, authority, and none of them had a clue where to begin. For the first time in her life, Leah felt something shift. Not just curiosity, this was heavier. A mix of clarity and fear. Like holding a lit match near dry paper and knowing the fire's about to catch. She didn't believe she could solve it all. But watching them flail reminded her of the time her cousin tried plugging an old hard drive into the TV and nearly bricked it. She had sat beside him, quietly rebooted the OS with a patch she jury-rigged from a half-broken USB. She'd figured it out in minutes. No one had taught her how. And now, here she was again. in a building full of people with every resource and no direction. She looked down at her notes. The symbols were beginning to align. Like her brain was reverse engineering the mess, building a blueprint without ever seeing the code. Her grip on the pencil tightened. She hadn't meant to be here today. But now, it felt like she was meant to be here. Somewhere above, soft alarms began to chime, alerts, not full-blown emergencies. Leah barely noticed. Her focus had narrowed. She wrote faster, connecting what she'd heard with what she knew. Kernel-level breach. System-wide access denial. Restore failed. It didn't sound like damage, it sounded like a lockdown. Deliberate. Someone hadn't destroyed the system. They'd frozen it. That meant the architecture was still intact. The bones were still there. If you knew where to look. Leah exhaled slowly. She wasn't afraid. She felt exactly like she had the first time she cracked open an old desktop tower her neighbor had left for the trash. Everyone said it was broken. But inside, it was still alive. It just needed patience. A screwdriver. And no one breathing down her neck.
The sky, too, carries a kind of quiet weight. Not the romantic lavender of twilight or the deep navy of stormy seas, but a pale, silvery blue that seems stretched too thin. On cloudless days, it becomes a dome of washed-out light. On cloudy ones, it softens to pearl gray, layered like old parchment. At night, it transforms. The stars burn bright here. There is no firelight to steal their stage. The moon casts everything in gentle monochrome, charcoal shadows, ash-white ground, silver-coated grass that rustles like whispers. Even your own clothing will soon reflect this palette. Robes of undyed wool, cloaks the color of dust or ash. Not chosen for fashion, but for function. You'll wear the steppe without realizing it. Its colors will settle into your skin. To live in this landscape is to see in tones that others miss. The faint blush of morning light on a distant hill. The dark smear of hooves across dew-covered plains. The soft, golden haze before sunset, when even the most battered soldier seems briefly illuminated. These are not colors that overwhelm. They do not call for admiration. But if you are quiet long enough, still enough, they begin to teach you something important. That beauty doesn't always bloom. Sometimes it simply persists. There is a kind of silence here that surprises people. Not the kind found in empty rooms or between spoken words. This silence isn't hollow. It's full. You feel it before you understand it. A quiet that presses against your skin, not heavy, not sharp, just present. It's the silence of space, of time stretched wide, of a land that has watched 1,000 years pass without flinching. No buzzing streetlights. No humming wires. No distant traffic or ticking clocks. Only the soft shuffle of hooves, the murmur of wind in the grasses, and now and then, the creak of leather or the low breath of a nearby horse. But what's striking about this silence isn't the lack of noise. It's how it listens back. You speak aloud, and your words seem to fall flat, swallowed, not echoed. You clear your throat, and even that feels strange, like an interruption. This place does not rush to fill the space around you. It simply waits. The Mongols understood this. They did not fear silence. They moved through it with ease, speaking only when necessary, observing when it was wise to be still. To them, noise was not proof of life. Stillness was not emptiness. In a world of wind and horses and sky, silence is not the absence of meaning. It is meaning. It's how you know you're not alone. Stand still long enough, and you'll begin to hear things. Not in the ears always, but somewhere deeper. The rustle of a fox passing through tall grass. The flap of a bird's wing over a far ridge. The sound of your own breath, quieter than you expected. You might also hear your thoughts, ones you've been too busy, too loud to notice. Out here, they rise to the surface like dust and water. Memories, questions, doubts, all gently laid before you by a silence that asks nothing, but receives everything. At first, you might fidget, try to break it with movement or muttering. But in time, you stop trying. You begin to understand this silence is not judging you. It is not cold. It is simply there, like the sky or the earth. And one night, as you rest beneath that endless sky, with nothing but your saddle and the beat of your heart, you will notice the silence once again. And this time, you won't fight it. You will breathe with it and let it listen. Look out across the steppe, not in imagination now, but as if you're truly standing there. Let your gaze stretch as far as it can. There are no fences to catch your eye, no mountains to mark the edge. Only a soft, rolling vastness that keeps going and going and going. It is easy in the modern world to forget how far distance used to feel. Today, we cross countries in hours, continents in a day. We measure journeys in screen taps and flight times. But here, distance is different. It is not a number. It is something you carry. The horizon always looks closer than it is. You might ride for a day, 10 hours in the saddle, and still find that hill in the distance no nearer. You begin to understand that space here is deceptive. It invites you forward, only to reveal more of itself. To a Mongol soldier, that distance was never discouraging. It was a challenge, a test of endurance, and something to be respected. Not feared, but never underestimated. Each mile brings exhaustion. Not the kind that breaks suddenly, but the slow, seeping kind. The ache in your lower back. The quiet tightening in your knees. The throb in your fingers as they grip the reins for the 100th time. You do not pass landmarks. You pass moments. A sudden patch of yellow flowers. A circling bird overhead. A dried creek bed that cuts the earth like an old scar. These are your signposts. And still, the land stretches. The sky never lowers. And the thought creeps in quietly. How will I ever know when I've arrived? For the horde, there is no final arrival. Only movement. Only the next encampment. The next pasture. The next piece of earth to cross beneath 1,000 hooves. Distance becomes something internal. You no longer ask how far is it? Instead, you ask, can I keep going? And the answer, most days, is simply yes. Because there is no other choice. Eventually, you stop noticing how far things are. Not because they're closer, but because your mind, your body, and your spirit have stretched with the land. You have become long like the road, quiet like the wind, patient like the horses you ride. And when the day ends, if it ends, you'll lie back on the hardened soil, gaze up at stars that blink in perfect stillness, and feel the vastness not as an enemy, but as something ancient and calm. You are very small, but you are not lost. You are simply far from everything, and that is enough. There is no sunrise alarm, no crackling hearth, no warm bed or soft linen to welcome you into the day. Instead, you wake to cold. Not a sharp cold, but one that has settled deep into your bones during the night, gentle, quiet, and indifferent. It doesn't shock you awake. It simply reminds you that sleep, out here, is never complete. Only paused. Above, the sky has begun its slow brightening. A pale silver bleeds softly into the horizon, chasing shadows across the grasslands. The stars are fading now, their watch over you quietly ending. But there is no curtain to draw, no door to open. The world is already awake, and you, slowly, stiffly, begin to rise. Your blanket, if you were lucky enough to have one, is thin. More often, it's just the same robe you wore yesterday, and the day before that. Your pillow? A saddlebag, rough and lumpy, smelling faintly of leather, old sweat, and grass. Your bedroll is the earth itself, uneven, often damp, sometimes frozen. There are no springs, no softness.
Watching the chaos unfold now, she felt it again, that unmistakable clarity. I know what this is. She had never seen so many important people look so completely lost. They gathered in a glass-walled room near the stairwell, a strange mix of sleek suits and rumpled hoodies. Some barked into phones. Others stared blankly at screens filled with blinking red alerts. One display showed what looked like a global map. But there was only one color on it, crimson. Spreading, node by node, like blood and water. Leah crept a little closer. Her worn-out sneakers made no sound on the tile. She hugged her notebook tight, eyes scanning the panicked crowd. These were people who were supposed to know what to do. But they didn't. Some shouted. Others whispered urgently. A heavy-set man slammed his fist on the table. "It can't be internal," he growled. "We triple firewalled that node after Zurich." A woman beside him countered calmly, "Then it's ghost protocol. It's mimicking normal user behavior, too clean for brute force." Leah didn't catch every term. But she caught what was missing. They weren't asking the right questions. Not even close. The air wasn't just tense, it was unraveling. She watched as someone tried a manual override, hands flying over keys, only to be met by an endless wall of rejection codes. "Blocked again," he muttered. "Level 4 encryption loop. Who builds this stuff?" Another snapped back, "Someone who wants us completely offline." Then a man, older than the others and clearly used to being the loudest, turned toward the open doorway. "Can we reach Marcus? We need top-level override now." A nervous assistant stammered, "He's upstairs, in the boardroom." On a call, or he was. Leah understood what they hadn't said aloud. Whatever was happening, it was happening fast. And no one was in control. She forgot to stay invisible. Took half a step forward, and before she could stop herself, the words escaped quietly. "Have you checked the socket overflow loop?" They landed like a pebble in still water. A ripple. Then stillness. Heads turned. One man scoffed. "What did she just say?" Another rolled his eyes. "Jesus. Who let someone's kid in here?" But not everyone laughed. One woman blinked, slowly. She didn't mock or dismiss. She just looked at Leah. Still. Thoughtful. Leah felt her cheeks flush with heat. Instant regret surged through her. "You spoke. Rule number 1, don't get seen. Don't get heard." She took a step back, heart pounding, already picturing her mom's horrified face when she found out Leah had wandered this far. Her hand clenched the notebook tighter, already preparing to vanish into the background. But then, she noticed someone watching her. Not annoyed. Not angry. Curious. He stood behind the main cluster. Younger than the rest. Maybe just a few years older than her. Not shouting. Not typing. Just watching. Elias, that's what the badge on his jacket said. Leah glanced at him, then away. But not before catching the slight tilt of his head. Like he was turning her words over in his mind. Elias wasn't like the others. His eyes weren't trying to measure her. They were trying to understand. Something twisted in her gut, a strange blend of fear and something else. Hope? She hadn't blurted that out randomly. It wasn't a guess. She'd seen that exact loop glitch in a simulation once. Late one night, hunched on her neighbor's tile floor, typing on a half-dead keyboard she'd soldered herself. A bootlegged OS, a patched-together emulator, a bug she never forgot. It wasn't theory to her. It was memory. Meanwhile, the older man who had laughed now paced in a tight circle, muttering about wasted time. "We're throwing darts in the dark," someone said. "None of the backdoor patches are working," added another. "We don't even know what we're up against, and we can't reach Marcus." A third voice muttered, "He's gonna lose it when the investor metric spike red. He's gonna explode." Leah should have been scared. But what really scared her was how wrong they all were. They were fishing for brute force attacks. But this wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It was elegant. Something had nested inside the system. Something that knew how to hide. Whoever built it hadn't just hacked a wall. They'd written themselves into the architecture. And Leah knew that kind of logic. Not because someone had taught her. Because she felt it. And worst of all, she wasn't even sure she could explain how she knew. That was the curse of learning alone. You built instincts, not vocabulary. She opened her mouth again, but no sound came. In the glass room, the group had begun to fracture. Some desperate to act, others paralyzed by fear of making it worse. Then, the woman who had blinked earlier finally spoke. We should at least check what she said. Her tone wasn't loud, but it was solid. Someone else, bristling, fired back. We're really taking advice from a kid now? And that's when Elias stepped forward. Not with volume, just quiet certainty. Her question made sense. Heads turned. It's a logical entry point, he continued. A recursive lockout loop, especially if the attacker wanted to make it look like user error. He looked at Leah, then at the others. Let's not pretend anyone in this room has a better lead. The room went quiet again. Leah swallowed. She didn't understand office politics, but she understood the look Elias gave her. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was belief. Not full-blown trust. Not yet. But something that could become trust. She had cracked the silence. And like it or not, they saw her now. Leah took a small step back, unsure whether she'd helped or just made things worse. The suit stayed skeptical. The engineers were still restless. But the conversation had shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But the current had changed. She had introduced an idea into the room that hadn't existed a minute ago. And it had made them pause. That was rare. That meant something. She slipped out of the room and into the hallway, pressing her back against the wall. From behind a column, she watched. Elias's gaze followed her, not with suspicion, but with interest. He hadn't looked away since she spoke. He didn't smile. Didn't nod. Just watched. Like she was a puzzle piece that hadn't been on the table until now. Leah sank down to the floor, opened her notebook, and scribbled 3 words. Socket overflow loop. If they wouldn't check it, she would. She wasn't guessing. She was remembering. They let her in because they had nothing left. It wasn't faith. It wasn't logic. It was the collective shrug of a team out of options. The IT lead, a tall man with thinning hair and a voice like sandpaper, muttered. Sure. Why not? Maybe the janitor's kid can do what our whole division couldn't. A few bitter chuckles trickled out. Hollow laughs. Nervous. Defensive. No one stopped her. No one really believed she'd do anything other than sit and blink at the mess on the screen. Except Elias.
When you stretch, your joints crack gently. Your shoulders ache from the way you curled yourself to preserve warmth. Your legs feel heavy from yesterday's ride and the long rides before it. But there is no time to linger. No one waits for you. No one comes to rouse you with a kind voice or a cup of tea. The camp is already stirring, quietly, efficiently. You hear the soft thud of hooves nearby, the shifting of men gathering their things, the low murmur of voices exchanging brief words. No chatter. No greetings. Only motion. You do not splash cold water on your face. There is no basin, no mirror. You wipe your hands on a patch of grass. Run your fingers through your hair to untangle the night's knots. Shake the dust from your robe. Everything you need is strapped to your horse, or to your own body. You carry your life with you. Every morning. Every mile. And so, your first act of the day is not to plan or speak, but simply to rise. To gather yourself. To remind your muscles of their work. And as you stand, feet planted firmly on the vast earth, you glance toward the horizon. The wind, ever present, lifts the edge of your sleeve. And with that quiet gesture, the day has begun. Not with ceremony. Not with peace. But with presence. And movement. And the knowledge that your comfort is not coming, not today, and not tomorrow. You are not here for comfort. You are here to endure. And that begins, always, with waking. There is no wardrobe to choose from. No polished mirror, no closet lined with neatly folded fabric. Only what you carry, and what has carried you this far. Your clothing is not designed for beauty. It's not meant to express your mood, or your taste, or your identity. It is meant to survive. And so, this morning, like every morning, you dress in what the step demands. First, the base layer. A coarse tunic, often of wool, sometimes cotton, if you're fortunate. It hugs the body close, absorbing sweat, dust, and the fatigue of yesterday's ride. It has not been washed in weeks. But you no longer notice the smell. Your nose has learned what the body must ignore. Next, the deal, a long robe worn by warriors and herders alike. Thick, stiff at the seams, heavy with wear. You wrap it left over right, fastening it at the shoulder and waist with a narrow sash. It binds you not tightly, but completely, like a second skin molded by wind and weather. The fabric scratches. It always has, especially at the wrists and neck. But you no longer reach to adjust it. You've learned that scratching leads to fraying, and fraying leads to exposure. The sash at your waist is not just a belt. It holds everything. A small knife, a pouch of dried curds, a flint for fire, a scrap of cloth once meant for cleaning, now stiff from use. On your legs, loose trousers, tied with twine below the knee to keep out thistles and crawling things. And over them, tall leather boots. Cracked, scarred, more patched than boot in some places. But still, they serve you. Their soles are thin. You feel every rock, every divot in the ground. Your gait has changed over time, less heel, more toe, a rhythm shaped by long rides and longer marches. You lift your coat, thicker, heavier, often lined with fur if the weather has turned. It smells faintly of horse, of smoke, of the road. You pull on your hat, pointed or round, sometimes trimmed in fleece, depending on what your unit could find or trade for. It shields your head from sun and frost alike. But it does little to quiet the wind. By the time you're dressed, your skin has already begun to sweat beneath the layers. But you say nothing. Everyone else is sweating too. There is no glamour in this ritual. No change of style from one day to the next. Your clothes age with you. They take on your shape, your scent, your silence. And yet they also remind you. That softness is a luxury. That comfort is brief. And that survival, true survival, doesn't come from what looks good, but from what endures. You tug at your sleeves, tighten the sash, and take one last glance at your gear. There is no room for vanity out here. Only preparation. And so, dressed in dust and wool, in leather and the sweat of your own effort, you step into the day, layered in the life of the steppe. Before you eat, before you speak, before you even fully wake, you see it. Your horse. Not waiting for you. Not tethered in obedience. Just nearby, grazing. Watching. Breathing mist into the morning air. In the Mongol world, your horse is not a pet. Not a tool. It is your lifeline. Your first duty, your first companion, your first test. You rise stiffly from your bed of earth, robe still clinging with dust, and walk to where it stands. It lifts its head, flicks its ears. Not in fear. Just in notice. Mongol horses are small, stocky, sure-footed, quiet. They are not grand or dramatic like the chargers of knights in far-off lands. But they endure. They move through storms without complaint. They carry the weight of war and distance on their backs as if it were nothing. You approach slowly, respectfully. There is no saddle yet. No bridle. Just a hand on the neck. A soft murmur, half breath, half instinct. In the stillness of the morning, your horse becomes your mirror. If you are restless, it will be wary. If you are calm, it will let you close. You check the hooves first. Run your fingers gently along the fetlocks. Brush away clinging frost or dirt. Look for cracks, stones, swelling. No detail is too small. A lame horse could be the end of you. Next, you run your hands along the back. Feel the muscle, the ribs. Is it too lean? Too tired? You feed it before you feed yourself. A handful of grain, if you have it. Sometimes dried grass pulled from your own saddlebag. It chews slowly, and you wait. When it finishes, you bring out the gear, saddle, blanket, bags. The saddle is wooden, flat, hard. It has no give. But it is light and reliable, made to survive countless falls and fast removals. You drape the blanket first, then ease the saddle on, careful not to pinch or shift its skin. You cinch it tight, not too tight. You've learned this balance with time. The bridle comes next. Some riders go without. They guide with knees, heels, breath. But for now you use both. It accepts it, without drama, because it knows you. And you are learning, slowly, to know it too. In many armies, a horse is something you are given. Here, it is something you earn. Every day. Every mile. Without it you do not move. Without it you do not hunt. Without it you do not return. There is no bond quite like this. Not forged in affection, but in rhythm. You begin to move like your horse, to think in pace and terrain. And someday, not long from now, you'll wake not to an alarm or the call of a commander, but to the sound of hooves nearby, steady and familiar, reminding you, it's time to begin again.
The quiet intern with the sharp eyes stayed near. He hadn't said much since defending her. But now, he stepped forward and gently pulled out a chair. Here, he said softly. You'll need to stand on it a little. The table's too high. Leah nodded once, clutching her notebook like armor. She stepped up with the quiet dignity of someone who'd learned how not to flinch when people laughed. No one gave her instructions. No one explained the problem. She didn't ask. She stood in front of the terminal and stared at the screen for 10 long seconds. Not from hesitation. From calibration. Lining up muscle memory. Letting her instincts catch up to the keyboard. The display was chaos. Command prompts tangled in each other. Admin locks. Firewall denials. Diagnostic tools frozen mid-query. She exhaled slowly through her nose. Someone had already tried at least 3 different backdoor recoveries. None had worked. This wasn't brute force. It was personal. Something had been designed to live inside the system. Quietly. Elegantly. Unseen. Her eyes flicked upward, not at the code, but at the wall above the terminal. A shelf. A photo. A little girl, maybe 5, grinning wide from someone's shoulders. The man's face was cropped, but his watch. It matched the one worn by the furious CEO who had stormed through the building earlier. At the base of the frame, a tiny engraving. Amelia. 4 a.m. Welcome to the world. Leah smiled. Just once. Then typed. For Amelia. The screen responded immediately, but not dramatically. No sirens. No pop-ups. Just a blink. A soft new prompt appeared. One that hadn't been there before. Elias leaned closer. Eyes wide. Did you jest? He stopped. The sarcastic IT lead, still scrolling through his phone, glanced up and froze. Wait. What was that? Leah didn't answer. She was already moving. 2 layers deep. No hesitation. No guesswork. She typed like someone on familiar ground. Her notes stayed untouched beside her. She didn't need them. One of the engineers leaned forward, eyebrows furrowed. That override key, he muttered. We never tried using a personal-based fallback. Another replied slowly. We don't have personal-based fallbacks in the admin system, do we? No one had an answer. Leah just kept going. She wasn't showing off. She didn't even seem to remember the room was there. The way she worked, quiet, deliberate, felt like she was listening to a rhythm the rest of them couldn't hear. The tension in the room shifted. Not gone. Just redirected. No longer the tension of helplessness, now it was disbelief. A dozen trained, credentialed adults stood frozen, watching a child type commands into a system they had built but could no longer enter. For several seconds, no one dared speak. The only sound was the soft tap of Leah's fingers and the low hum of the CPU fans behind the terminal. The woman from earlier, the one who hadn't dismissed her, stepped closer, murmuring. She found the admin shell. The IT lead blinked rapidly, stunned. That shouldn't even be visible without authentication. Elias nodded once. Still watching. Because she authenticated, he said. Another voice, quiet, almost a whisper. With the CEO's personal cipher. Silence deepened. Heavy. Sharp. No one wanted to say what they were all thinking. That they'd missed the most obvious vulnerability. Not a flaw in the system, but in the person who built it. A father naming his daughter at 4 a.m. and letting that moment echo through everything. Even his passwords. Leah had known where to look. Not because she was lucky. Because she understood people. She'd seen enough locked doors to recognize the ones never meant to stay locked at all. It was Elias who broke the silence again. He stepped forward, not to explain, not to interfere, just to kneel beside her. You're in the shell, he said gently. What are you looking for now? She didn't look up, but she answered. The first loop. Her voice was calm. Clear. If I find the entry pattern, I can reverse the lockout. Her hands didn't slow. She moved through logs, error reports, corrupted entries. Some were disguised to look harmless. She didn't fall for it. Her fingers moved through the traps like she'd been born knowing how. No course had taught her this. No certification. She'd learned from scraped-together tutorials, from broken devices, from long nights alone with borrowed machines. And now, here she was. Doing what none of them could. The room stood behind her now. Silent. Humbled. Watching a child peel back the layers of failure they'd wrapped around themselves. What they thought was a joke. A moment of absurdity. Was fast becoming something else. A spark. A threat. A truth. That they had missed what mattered most. When Leah bypassed the first layer of encryption. When the lockout screen gave way. When the red static overlay faded from the central display. No one laughed. Because news moves faster than approval. It moved from one department to another. Not through memos. But through whispers passed between coffee mugs and tired eyes. The janitor's daughter is doing something to the system. It sounded like a joke. But it reached the top. Marcus Vale, CEO of Virion Technologies, paced in silence in a glass boardroom 2 floors up. His tablet dimmed. The metrics flatlined. Executives danced through a failing investor call. Polite lies. Polished smiles. But Marcus wasn't listening. He tapped the screen. Again. Harder. Then slammed it down. He turned to his assistant. Why is the system still down? The assistant, barely older than Elias, stammered something about breach layers and encryption protocols. Then hesitated. Sir, there's someone working on it. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Who? The assistant swallowed. A girl. From the lobby. Maintenance staff's daughter, I think. Marcus blinked. Once. Then turned. Left the room. Walked directly to the incident floor. Suspicion already blooming behind his eyes. Leah didn't know who Marcus Vale was. She didn't know he was watching her now. From behind glass. Like a hawk studying a shape it didn't like. She didn't look up. Her focus was total. The corrupted logs unraveled in front of her, threads she'd been pulling on since she was 5. Lips pressed. Brows drawn. Her body leaned slightly forward, an unconscious stance. Honed over years of scavenged hardware and floor-sitting repairs. Her hands didn't shake. Not because she wasn't nervous, she was. but because fear took too much time. And she didn't have any to spare. Every second of hesitation was another second the system slid further from recovery. She was already 3 shell layers deep. Navigating blind. Pattern recognition, not tools. Half the diagnostics had been disabled by the breach itself. Her notebook fluttered beside her in the hallway breeze. She hadn't touched it in minutes. She didn't need to. She wasn't referencing anymore. She was remembering. She had internalized the logic. Not just of the system, but of the attacker's mind. That's what no one else saw. This wasn't just a battle of code. It was a language. And she spoke it like breath. Behind the glass wall, Marcus Vale folded his arms. Disbelief hardened into something colder. He looked at the girl, no, the child. Sleeves pushed to her elbows, hoodie too large. Fingers moving across a keyboard built for professionals. Not playgrounds.
There is no fire crackling. No smell of fresh bread rising from an oven. No long meals shared around a warm table. Out here, breakfast is not a pause. It is a preparation. You eat not for pleasure, but for endurance. And you do it quickly, often without sitting down. Your hands reach for what's close, what lasts. A piece of dried meat, tough as leather but rich with salt and fat. It tears slowly, with effort like chewing bark. You don't mind. You've grown used to it. Next comes karut. A small, pale disc of dried yogurt, almost rock hard. You crack it between your teeth. It crumbles into sharp salt and sourness. Startling, but strangely satisfying. It reminds you you're alive. If there's any arag left, fermented mare's milk, you drink it now. Cool, thin, slightly fizzy. Its sharp tang wakes the mouth. Not sweet. Not smooth. But familiar. Some mornings, if the camp was lucky, there may be scraps of boiled millet. Lukewarm, bland, stored in a leather pouch. You scoop it out with your fingers. It sticks under your nails, dries on your hands. But it fills the belly. There are no cups, no plates, no napkins. You eat from cloth, from hand, from pouch. The same tools that carried you through yesterday carry your food today. And as you chew, your eyes do not close. You watch. The horizon. The other men. The horses. This is not a time for laughter. It is a time to feed the body just enough for what comes next. You feel it settling now. The food sitting heavy but helpful in your gut. The ache in your legs still present, but softened slightly by warmth in your stomach. You wipe your hand on your coat. No one scolds you. There is no one to. Everything you eat out here must travel well. Last in heat, last in cold. No fruits. No fresh bread. No eggs. Only what can be carried through storms, packed into saddlebags, stored in the folds of robes. Your palate does not celebrate these meals, but your body learns to thank them in its own way. You do not overeat. There is no such thing here. Only enough, and sometimes not even that. And so you rise again. Sling the pouch back across your chest. Feel the quiet weight of fuel in your belly. And walk toward your horse. There are still many miles ahead. And meals, brief, cold, simple, will come when they must. Never early. Rarely late. Out here, even hunger has its own rhythm. It might surprise you, at first, how quiet the mornings are. Even with men stirring, horses shifting, and leather creaking. There is almost no talking. No barking of orders. No morning greetings. No idle chatter to fill the space. It isn't shyness. It isn't tension. It's something older. Something woven into the way the Mongol Army moves through the world. A respect for quiet. A discipline of stillness. You listen closely, and hear only the essentials. The rustle of a robe being tied. The soft clang of a buckle. The steady exhale of a horse's breath. A low grunt as someone lifts their saddle. There is no need for speech. Everyone knows what to do. This silence is not awkward. It is not cold. It is useful. To speak out here is to risk disrupting a rhythm. The morning is not a moment of ceremony, but a return to motion. Voices are saved for commands, for warnings, for questions that matter. Everything else waits. You might nod to the man next to you. He might nod back. But there are no smiles. No small talk about the weather. The weather will tell you what it wants you to know. Even among friends, words are rare. The Mongol soldier lives in close company, but not in noise. He shares fire, food, blood, and battle, but not the constant need to speak. And there is a comfort in that. No need to explain yourself. No pressure to fill the silence. As you finish readying your horse, as the sun begins to rise a little higher, the silence continues. Not forced, not fragile, but lived in. You mount your horse. The leather squeaks. You feel the weight of the saddle beneath you, the rhythm of the animal beginning to move. Still no words. And in that silence you find clarity. Not dramatic. Just clean. You know what the day demands. You know what your body can endure. You know the man beside you is thinking the same thing. And so, the column begins to form. One by one, like threads weaving into a long, moving line. Still quiet. Still focused. Still together. This is how every day begins. Not with noise, but with intention. And silence. A silence that belongs not just to the land, but to the men who ride across it. By now you're dressed. You've eaten, in the way one eats when food is fuel. Your horse is saddled. And the morning is no longer new, it has become a slow, steady unfolding. Now comes the next quiet ritual. Not flashy. Not fast, but vital. You reach for the saddle's horn, place your foot in the stirrup, worn smooth by hundreds of climbs, and pull yourself up. The movement is familiar, but it is never casual. This is not just mounting a horse. It's entering a different way of being. The Mongol horse does not wait for commands like a trained servant. It is no stage animal, no statue of obedience. It is a creature with its own ideas. Ideas formed by wind, distance, hunger, and instinct. And it knows more about this land than you ever will. It knows which patch of grass will hold frost, which stream runs deepest after rain, which smell means danger, which path means shelter. When you climb on its back, you are not its master. You are at best a partner. More often, you are simply the one being carried. The saddle beneath you is high and hard. There is no cushion. But the design is deliberate. Meant for speed, for balance, for long hours across uneven earth. You settle in. Not slouched. Not stiff. The spine straight, the legs relaxed, the hands loose but aware. You test the reins gently. Not tugging, just asking. Your horse responds with a slight shift of weight, a roll of muscle. Ready. Around you, the other riders are doing the same. One by one, they rise into motion. Each movement quiet, precise, earned. And then you begin to ride. Not fast. Not yet. Just a slow walking rhythm. The clip of hooves soft against soil. The sway of your body adjusting with the motion. Your breath falling into sync with the animal beneath you. It's not comfort you feel. It's alignment. A physical agreement between rider and horse. In time, you'll forget your own feet. You'll begin to feel through the horse's legs. The way it shifts its weight on the slope. The way it pauses, just slightly, when sensing something ahead. You'll come to trust this beast, not through affection, but through shared experience. Together you will cross rivers, climb hills, sleep side by side beneath an open sky. But for now, this morning, as the sun rises behind you, and the line of riders stretches quietly ahead, you feel the first full moment of what it means to ride in the Mongol way. Not to dominate, but to travel as one. Once you are mounted, once your gear is settled and your horse finds its pace, there is nothing else to do. No conversation, no music, no spectacle, only motion. The horse moves beneath you, slow at first, walking carefully over dew-darkened grass. Its hooves strike the earth in a pattern you quickly stop noticing, because it becomes everything. That pattern becomes the clock you follow. A soft, four-beat rhythm, like a drum too far to hear but too close to escape. Hoof. 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 Breathe in. Hoof. 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 Breathe out. This is the music of the step. You shift in the saddle when needed, left leg forward then right. Your hands rest low. Not tight. Just aware.
He turned to the nearest engineer. "Get security," he said. Flat. Final. The engineer flinched. "Sir, she's a child." Marcus snapped. "And this is a multi-million-dollar infrastructure." His voice stayed low, unshaken. He didn't need to raise it. People obeyed Marcus Vale the way machines obeyed scripts. Automatically. Without questioning the code behind the order. Security was summoned in seconds. One man already muttering into his earpiece. Inside the room, the IT lead noticed him first. He stiffened, said nothing. But something in his face shifted. From confusion to discomfort. Then Elias turned. Saw the guards. And moved. Without thinking. He stepped in front of Leah. Planted himself between her and the approaching officers. Like a firewall. Unproven. But unflinching. "She's the only one making progress," Elias said. His voice came out louder than he intended. The words hit the air like sparks over gasoline. One of the guards hesitated, thrown by the certainty in the boy's tone. The other turned to Marcus, waiting. But Marcus didn't answer. He was watching Elias now, studying not just his words, but his stance, shoulders squared, legs trembling just slightly. The boy was scared, but he wasn't moving. "You're telling me," Marcus said slowly, "that you've handed our critical recovery to a child? With no clearance, no training, no permission?" Elias didn't blink. "I'm telling you," he said. "She's deeper in the system than we ever got. And she hasn't tripped a single failsafe." Marcus's expression stayed blank. But something behind his eyes shifted. Doubt? Curiosity? No one could tell. The murmurs started behind them. Engineers, skeptics minutes ago. Now leaning closer. She opened logs we couldn't access. She isolated the second cluster anomalies. She might actually be doing it. But Leah still hadn't looked up. She didn't see the guards freeze. Didn't hear Elias defend her. Didn't feel the atmosphere shift around her. She was inside now. Inside the breach. Unpacking command injections. Reverse engineering malicious data packets. Not just skill. Clarity. The kind forged from late nights and broken machines. Where patterns slowly emerged from chaos. Like stars through smog. Leah saw the code wasn't random. It was personal. Someone had written it. Not a bot. Not a brute force. A person. Brilliant. Angry. Someone who had laced their grudge into every corner of the system. Like a story begging to be read. And Leah read it. Breadcrumb by breadcrumb. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't rushing. Her expression never changed. But her pulse was thunder in her ears. This was the challenge she had always imagined. Not one you just solved. One you understood. Somewhere in the room, someone whispered. "She's breaking through another layer." "Idle," someone else said. A few stepped closer. Even the IT lead, the one who had scoffed, now leaned in with quiet awe. But Leah didn't hear them. Her mind lived in binary. Her heart moved in logic. She was far past distraction. Far past doubt. And as her fingers flew, still moving, she remained the only person in the building who wasn't waiting for permission. Because she didn't need it. She was already inside. The machine. She had gone 3 layers deeper into the system's architecture. And what she saw wasn't chaos. It was elegant. This wasn't the reckless clutter of a typical breach. It was artful. Methodical. Deliberate. Whoever had written this hadn't come to smash their way in. They had built something. Hidden not behind firewalls, but between the lines. Leah leaned in, eyes narrowing. The code no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a language. Dense. Dangerous. But strangely beautiful. There were loops with decoy payloads. Recursive traps disguised as critical files. Decision trees so precisely mimicked. They could fool even seasoned engineers into digital dead ends. But Leah didn't take the expected routes. She moved sideways. Diagonally. Through the structure like a maze she somehow already knew. Her breath slowed. She wasn't solving a problem anymore. She was deciphering a story. Then, a malformed line of syntax caught her eye. Not because it was broken, but because it was familiar. Her heart stuttered. Confused. Then curious. Then recognition. She had seen this before. The fragment wasn't identical. It had evolved. But the bones were there. Unmistakable. Her mind snapped back. To a night in a borrowed internet cafe. Across from her cousin's apartment. Her mother thought she was sleeping in the back room. Instead, she was bent over a cracked laptop. Screen flickering. Logging into a forgotten forum. Broken links. Cryptic usernames. Code dumps not meant for children. Most of it had been trash. But one thread. Digital phantoms, symmetric disruption methods. No replies. Just a file dump. And a single comment. It's not about breaking in. It's about becoming the door. She had been too young to understand. But something in that script had stuck. She copied it by hand. Then spent weeks pulling it apart on her cousin's dying tower PC. Tweaking. Testing. Learning it like a secret alphabet. And now, she was staring at its descendant. Matching logic fragments. Identical fault triggers. Even the same obscure variable names. This wasn't coincidence. This was a signature. Her fingers froze. The spell of logic shattered. Replaced by something colder. She wasn't staring at a stranger's breach. She was staring at someone who had walked the same crooked path. Alone. Outside the system. Self-taught. Unseen. This wasn't just malicious code. It was a fingerprint. A voice. Calling across the dark. Disguised as destruction. A hacker who had studied the same forbidden lines. Who had built the same way. Learned the same way. Likely with no mentor. No classroom. No structure. Just fire. Frustration. And a mind that moved too fast for the world to keep up. Leah felt the floor tilt beneath her. For the first time. She didn't know what to feel. Awe. Or fear. Because if someone like her had gone down this road. And chosen destruction over discovery. What did that say about the path she was walking? She had always believed her gift. The ability to see systems as stories. Made her different in a good way. But what if it was also what made her dangerous? She sat back slightly. Her hands trembling now. Her mind spinning through a tangle of thoughts she didn't know how to name. There was no one to ask. No teacher here to explain. What it meant when your enemy looked like your reflection. Was this sabotage driven by vengeance? Or was it something colder? A test? An experiment? Someone had been pushing boundaries. Just to see where they broke. Leah's stomach twisted. The code wasn't angry. It wasn't frantic. It was precise. Cold. Patient. And that scared her more than any chaotic breach ever could. Because it meant the author hadn't lost control. They had chosen. She thought of the little girl in the photo frame. Amelia. What would have happened if the system hadn't been stopped? Would the attack have erased files? Stolen client data? Left the company exposed? To collapse? To lawsuits? To ruin?
The wind moves around you, but it doesn't speak now. It watches. It listens. It wraps itself around your robe like a second rider, invisible but always present. Your breath begins to match your horse's. In, with the stride. Out, with the next. You do not count time. You count distance by how your body begins to feel. A stiffness in your spine. A subtle ache behind the knees. The faint, familiar tingle in your fingers as they grip the reins for the third or fourth hour. This is what movement means out here. There are no markers of progress. No signs. No milestones. Only the rhythm. Hoof. 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 Sometimes, when the sun rises higher, the pace shifts. A gentle trot, then perhaps a short gallop. A blur of earth and air and vibration through the bones of your horse. And then, just as suddenly, a return to calm. The Mongol does not ride with haste. He rides with purpose. There are moments you might forget where you are. Lost in the steady pulse of the animal, the coolness of the air, the quiet folding of the earth beneath you. And when you return to yourself, you realize something has changed. The sky is higher. The land more open. The shadows longer. You have moved. Not because you forced it, but because you followed. And as the day stretches forward, without map, without road, this rhythm will remain. Hoof. 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 Breathe in. Breathe out. You do not command the pace. You become the pace. You do not conquer the land. You pass through it. One breath, one hoofbeat at a time. As the hours pass, and the sun slips higher in its long arc across the sky, you begin to notice how much of this world speaks without words. There is a language here. A quiet one. Made not of syllables or songs, but of textures. Of worn leather, dry earth, shifting weight, and distant smells. You feel it first in your saddle. The stiff creak with every movement. The groan of the wooden frame beneath you. The strap that pulls a little too tight across your thigh. The scent, aged hide, animal oil, sweat, and sunbaked dust, rises each time you shift your weight. This is not discomfort. It is simply communication. The saddle reminding you of its presence. Reminding you to sit with awareness. Your reins speak too. Not with tugs, but with small tensions. You feel the language in your palms. When the horse hesitates. When it senses something ahead. When it pulls ever so slightly to one side. You don't speak back with force. You answer with a lean, a nudge of the knee, a tilt of your posture. Like a dance neither of you ever agreed to. But somehow both understand. Your boots press against the stirrups. The sole's thin enough now that you feel the cool metal underfoot. The dust rises with every step. Fine, pale, weightless. It clings to your robe, to your lashes, to the hair at your temples. It gathers in the creases of your hands, mixes with sweat, becomes part of your scent. You run a gloved hand across your saddlebag. The leather is dry, almost brittle in places. It whispers to you too. To oil it soon, before it begins to crack. You add that to your growing list of quiet promises. Things that must be done, when time allows. The dust swirls and settles. The leather creaks and carries. And you begin to realize. Nothing out here is ever truly silent. It only speaks in different ways. The wind speaks by pulling at your hood. The saddle speaks through your spine. Your horse speaks through motion. And the land speaks through dust. If you listen closely, you'll hear how everything is alive with attention. Not urgent. Not loud. Just present. You are not moving through silence. You are moving through a world that waits for you to learn its language. And over time, you will. As the sun arcs overhead, what was once soft and silver turns to something sharper. And suddenly, you're not alone. At first, you only catch it in your periphery. A long, narrow shape riding beside you, stretching over grass and stone. You turn your head, and it follows. When you shift in your saddle, it shifts too. It mirrors your movements without delay. A perfect twin made of absence. Your shadow. It trails you without question, without need, without voice. And yet, in this landscape, it becomes one of your few constant companions. There are no walls out here to cast shade. No buildings, no trees thick enough to offer shelter. So the shadow is long, always stretching, always drifting quietly beside your mount. It changes hour by hour. In the morning, it walks ahead of you. Midday, it huddles close beneath your horse's belly. By late afternoon, it reaches again to your left or your right, reminding you of the time slipping behind your back. When you ride alone, it is your only witness. When you ride in a group, the plain is full of them. Dozens, hundreds of thin figures dancing beside real men, doubling the army in silence. At times, your eyes grow tired of watching the land. It is too open, too repetitive. You begin to study your shadow instead. How your posture has changed. How the wind pulls at the loose folds of your coat. How the horse's mane flickers like black grass in that flat, dark reflection. In the absence of mirrors, this is the only likeness of yourself you see. Not your face. Not your eyes. Just your form in motion. And somehow, that's enough. Because on the steppe, appearance means little. But movement means survival. The shadow reminds you that you are still going forward. That the land has not claimed you yet. That you still cast something on this world. A mark, however temporary. And when the sun begins to lower, when the light softens again and the world turns gold at the edges, your shadow grows tall and strange. It seems to lift from the earth, as if becoming something other than you. And you wonder briefly what the land sees when it looks back at you. A rider? A shape? A flicker of movement? Or just a long shadow passing over the grass? Not to stay, just to pass. You've been riding for hours now. Perhaps 6. Perhaps more. There is no watch on your wrist. No clock tower in the distance. No hour to aim for. Only the march. The steppe does not tell you where you are. It offers no signs, no paths, no end in sight. The horizon stretches on, a mirage that refuses to be caught. You ride toward it, but it always slips just ahead. Like the future, or memory, or sleep when it will not come. The Mongol army is not moving toward a town. Not today. There is no village to sack, no wall to climb, no battlefield waiting. Only somewhere else. A better camp. A better grazing ground. A better position from which to wait. And so you ride into nothing. There are no milestones to tick off. No applause when you pass a certain point. Just hoof after hoof. Breath after breath. Dust after dust. Your world becomes small, and yet enormous. You notice the sweat drying in the curve of your elbow. You notice the way your horse flares its nostrils, sensing water still 2 valleys away. You notice your own heartbeat. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Just there. The land around you barely changes. A gentle hill. A cluster of low shrubs. A shift in the color of the soil. You pass these things like clouds passing over the sun. Softly. Briefly. Without comment. There are no songs for this kind of march. No battle cries. No drums. Only the sound of hooves. And leather. And your own breathing in time with the creature beneath you. If you speak at all, it is only to warn of a pit or a stone. A gesture, a nod, a low word pass back through the column. No one raises their voice. The wind carries everything. And still, you march.
Or worse, would it have looked like an accident? Leah's mind spun. For the first time since this began, she hesitated. She thought about pulling her hands away, letting someone else take over, letting the adults handle it. But the adults hadn't recognized the trail. Only she had. Elias noticed the shift. He hadn't spoken for several minutes, afraid to break her focus. But now he leaned closer. "Leah," he said gently. She didn't look up. "What is it?" he asked. "Did you find something?" Her voice was small, but steady. "Yeah," she said. I think I know who built this." Elias blinked. "You mean, like, a group?" "No," she whispered. "I mean, someone like me." He didn't answer. Didn't try to comfort her. Didn't fill the silence. He understood enough not to. Leah kept typing. Slower now. Tracing the logic trail deeper into the system's corrupted roots. But something had shifted in her posture. Shoulders tense. Movements cautious. Not because she didn't understand the code. She understood it better than anyone in the room. But now she understood what it meant. This wasn't a puzzle. It was a conversation. A challenge. Someone had built this breach, knowing that only a certain kind of mind would follow it to the end. Someone like her. The thought thrilled and terrified her. Because if they were watching, what would they do when they realized? Someone had followed? Still, she didn't stop. Even as her hands trembled, Leah kept digging. Each line of code was a step closer to a confrontation she hadn't expected. She wasn't just fixing a system. She was following a trail. And at the end of that trail wasn't just a bug or a virus. It was a mind. A mirror. Twisted. Someone who had once seen the world in numbers and logic and shadows and chosen destruction. Leah didn't know who they were. Didn't know why they had done it. But she knew this. If someone like that existed, she had to see it through. Not for Virion. Not for Marcus. Not even for her mother. For herself. To prove there was another path. Another ending. A different kind of legacy. Because this ghost in the machine had spoken her language. And she was ready to answer. The system's heartbeat flickered back to life. A faint line of green scrolled across one of the big screens. Gasps. Murmurs. One engineer cursed softly under his breath. But Marcus Vale didn't move. He didn't clap. He didn't speak. He stood at the back of the room, arms folded, watching the tiny girl at the terminal, like she'd grown out of the circuitry itself. His executives whispered behind him. Engineers exchanged stunned looks. One manager began pacing, wide-eyed, like waking from a nightmare. But Marcus's eyes never left her. Her name was Leah. No last name. Not yet. The daughter of a cleaning woman. No records. No digital trail. Beyond basic building logs. And now she sat before a machine no one else could fix. With hands that barely reached the keyboard, she had answered something. The entire infrastructure team had failed to crack. Not with brute force. Not with luck. With understanding. She had walked into the code. And walked back out. And Marcus, the man who built this empire on data, on efficiency, on risk assessment, had no idea what to make of her. He said nothing. As she finished typing and stepped back, clutching her worn notebook to her chest like a shield. She didn't look up. Not even when Elias placed a quiet, shaking hand on her shoulder. Someone offered her water. Another whispered about calling the board. But Marcus turned and left the room. Without a sound. his mind louder than any explosion. He walked back to his office, like a man retracing old steps. Shoes heavy, hands clenched tighter than he realized. Once inside, he closed the door, dismissed his assistant with a glance, and opened the security archive. The footage was already bookmarked. Leah at the terminal. The exact window of time. From her first keystroke to the moment the system came back online. He scrubbed slowly, frame by frame, eyes scanning, lips pressed tight, fingers moving, not like a child playing pretend, but like a seasoned technician, confident, decisive, certain. He paused, zoomed in. Her posture, her stillness. That was what struck him. Not what she was doing, but how she held herself while doing it. A memory rose. He tried to push it down, but it surfaced anyway. A dirt path outside the old orphanage in Aveline. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, sitting on a step, with a busted radio in her lap, twisting wires with fingers blackened by grease. She never spoke, but she was always there. Every day after classes. Every day he returned from errands. She had no family. No chance. Once, she told him quietly, "If I can fix the radio, maybe I can hear voices from a better place." One afternoon, the radio sparked in her hands. She didn't flinch. She laughed. Marcus had stood behind her, frozen. And then one day, she was gone. No note. No explanation. He never asked what happened. Didn't want to know. He buried it. Like he buried everything. Told himself forgetting was strength. That survival meant cutting ties with what couldn't come with him. But now, watching Leah on screen, still framed in the moment the system came back to life, something cracked. The set of her shoulders. The way she didn't flinch. It wasn't just talent. It was familiarity. Marcus leaned back in his chair, hand steepled in front of his face. The footage was paused, but it burned into his vision. He wasn't used to being shaken. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts, faced down boardroom revolts, recovered from PR disasters that would have crippled lesser men. But none of that had prepared him for the sight of this child. So calm inside the chaos. Doing what grown men couldn't. And not for recognition. Not for money. Just because she could. Now, the question wasn't just what she had done. It was what it meant. How had he become the kind of man who almost called security on a girl? Whose brilliance outshone his entire team? How had he learned to measure people by job titles? By lanyards, by LinkedIn profiles? And forgotten that genius often grows in silence. In places where no one's watching. He felt sick. Not with guilt. At least not entirely. But with a dawning realization. Somewhere along the way, he had amputated the part of himself that once believed in impossible things. And she had just brought it back. Not with words, but with keystrokes. He scrubbed through the footage again. Slower this time. Watching her movements like a code he needed to decipher. He paused at one frame. Her hand rested lightly on the side of the terminal. Fingers curled like she was listening through the metal. He thought of the girl at the orphanage again. The one who vanished before anyone thought to ask where she'd gone. Was Leah going to disappear too, once this moment passed? Would anyone fight to keep her seen? His chest tightened.
You may think of home. Though home feels far and uncertain. You may think of food. Though hunger fades into background noise. You may think of the end of the day. The hope of rest, of fire, of warmth. But the land does not hurry. And so neither do you. You march, not toward a place, but through one. The steppe has no interest in your plans. It only offers distance, and distance must be crossed. So you ride into nowhere, with no banner but sky, no guide but shadow, no purpose but to continue, because in the Mongol way, even nowhere is a direction worth traveling. Evening does not arrive quickly out here. It unfolds. Like smoke drifting across the land, it moves softly, without announcement. First cooling the air, then dimming the edges of the sky, and finally softening the color of everything you see. And so the Mongol army prepares to stop. Not with trumpets, not with commands shouted from high places, but with glances, with gestures, with the slow circling of riders as they begin to peel away from the column. There are no stone walls to protect them, no trenches dug, no tents bright with silk or embroidered flags. This camp is not a fortress. It is a living shape, changing each night depending on the land, the weather, the mood of the horses. They find a place with grass still thick beneath the hooves, a slope nearby, perhaps, to keep the wind from biting too hard, and enough space that each family, each group of riders, can spread out, but not so far that their fires cannot be seen by one another. The horde settles like breath on glass, softly, without edges. Riders dismount. Not quickly. They are sore, quiet. Horses are watered, their saddles removed with care, blankets brushed down, nostrils checked. One man moves among them, tying a line, his hands knowing what to do without thought. And still, no one builds a wall. No one digs a moat. This camp is defended not by stone, but by knowledge. Knowledge of distance, of weather, of how sound travels in the cold. Each man knows where to sleep, where not to step, where to keep his bow in reach. Fires are lit. Small, smoky, low to the ground. Enough to warm hands, not enough to betray position. Food is not prepared in pots but in pouches. Bits of dried meat are softened in water, or warmed by the embers. No one feasts. No one starves. This is not a place to live. It is a place to pause. A camp without walls, but with structure, in its quiet way. The old settle near the middle. The scouts sleep near the edge. The horses form their own circle, as if they, too, understand where they belong. And the land receives them. No protest. No welcome. Just the vast acceptance of a place used to temporary guests. The sun is almost gone now, and the camp, if you could fly above it, would look like a scattering of coals on a blanket. Each fire a flicker of presence in a wide, breathing world. And tomorrow? They will be gone again, leaving behind nothing but bent grass, and the memory of warmth in the earth. There are no maps in your hands, no scrolls to unroll beside a fire, no ink lines to trace with a finger while someone points and says, "We are here." Out on the steppe, the only map that matters is the one you carry inside. The Mongol rider learns it not from a school, but from the land itself. Passed down by voice, by path, by the shape of wind on grass. You do not think in roads or borders. You think in rivers, in hills, in the taste of the soil when the rain first falls. You know where the grass sweetens, where wolves hunt, where the ground goes soft after snow. This map is not static. It breathes. It changes with the seasons, with migration, with war. One ridge may mean safety in summer, and death by exposure in winter. A stream remembered as shallow may run wild after rain. And so you do not memorize it like a book. You feel it, like a song learned by heart. The stars help too. Each night, they turn overhead. Quiet, faithful, timeless. You recognize their patterns. The way one points to water, another to the line of mountains 2 days south. Even in cloud, you know by wind and scent where you are. When someone asks, "How far to the Orkhan?" you do not answer in miles. You answer in days, or rides, or the kind of fatigue it leaves in your legs. And when someone is lost, you do not consult a compass. You find the nearest shepherd, the oldest rider, the quiet man who has crossed that pass every winter since he was 10. The map in your mind is not just distance. It is memory. It is survival. You remember where your horse stumbled 3 springs ago, where lightning struck a birch tree and left it blackened, where your friend once waited out a storm beneath an outcrop that no longer exists. These are not landmarks to be drawn. They are felt. They are lived. And so, even tonight, as you sit by your small fire, eating slowly, half asleep, you are aware. You know where the river bends, where the stars will shift by midnight, where the edge of the camp fades into grassland. You close your eyes, and the land is there. Not beneath you, but within you. A map etched without ink, drawn by hooves, by hunger, by time. And when you rise tomorrow, you will not ask where to go. You will simply know, as the light fades completely, and the last glint of the sun slips beneath the world. You settle beside your fire, small, flickering, a brief defiance against the chill. There is no feast waiting. No courses, no servants, no platters carved from wood or metal. Only what you carried, and what fire can coax into warmth. You kneel or sit cross-legged, pulling the cloak tighter around your knees, and unfold your evening meal with quiet, practiced hands. A pouch of dried mutton, hard, salted, not tender but honest. You hold it over the smoke for a moment, softening it just enough to chew. Sometimes there is broth, made from the bones of last week's hunt, saved in a skin, warmed again in a dented pot balanced carefully among the embers. It tastes of ash, fat, and smoke. Simple, full. The smoke curls around you as you eat, scenting your robe, your hair, your skin. You will carry it with you long after the fire dies. It becomes part of you, a language without words. No one speaks much. Maybe a murmur. Maybe a story told in low tones. Not to entertain, but to remember. You hear a cough nearby, the scrape of a blade against wood, the sound of someone blowing softly on tinder to revive a dying flame. These are the voices of the evening. Sometimes you share. A strip of meat passed to the man beside you. A sip of arag from your flask. Not because it is a ritual, but because it is right. Food here is not sacred, but it is respected. Every bite took effort to carry, to preserve, to prepare. And though it is plain, you eat with care. No crumbs wasted. No fire left burning longer than needed. Everything measured. Everything accounted for. The land watches. It always does. And so, when you finish, your fingers greasy, your breath still tasting of salt and smoke, you wrap what remains, tie the pouch again, set the pot just outside the fire's reach, and lean back. You do not feel full, not in the way of a banquet, but you feel fed, satisfied, able to endure, and that is enough. As the night deepens, and the wind begins to stir the grass again, you exhale slowly into the cold, and the smoke speaks with you, rising, circling, vanishing into the dark. Nightfall on the steppe is not just a time. It is a presence.
He knew what the world would do, left alone. It would bury her gift. In silence. In poverty. In bureaucracy. They'd thank her. Maybe even celebrate her. For a day. Then they'd forget. Unless he didn't let them. Unless he stepped forward. Not as a CEO, but as a man who once watched someone vanish. Because no one cared enough to hold on. Leah had cracked his system. But more than that, she had cracked him. Now, sitting in the comfort of his corner office, surrounded by everything he once thought mattered, Marcus Vale was left with one question. What was he supposed to do with this child, who had just torn his world open? And still he stared at the footage, at her face, her hands, her posture. Unreadable, and so unmistakably familiar. They called her back the next morning. Not with ceremony. Not with a car or an official letter. Just a quiet request. Passed to her mother through an evening supervisor. Leah didn't ask questions. She just nodded. And prepared the only way she knew how. By making sure her notebook was in her backpack. And that her shoes, worn and thin, still held together. She wore the same hoodie. The one that always slipped past her wrists. And made her look smaller than she was. Her mother didn't walk her all the way in this time. She just stood at the entrance. Eyes nervous, lips tight. As Leah stepped alone through the glass doors. A polite assistant ushered her to a quiet room. With a long table. And a single blue chair waiting near the end. No one greeted her with fanfare. No orange juice. No overly bright smiles. The tone had changed. They weren't treating her like a child anymore. They were treating her like something else. Something they didn't quite understand. She sat down in the blue chair and waited. The room smelled like lemon polish and disinfectant. But she didn't mind. She was used to that smell. It was the one her mother carried home every day. One by one, they entered. Not the full team from yesterday. Just a few key people. Elias was there. Notebook in hand. Offering a small, encouraging smile. That made her shoulders relax. Just slightly. An older woman with cropped hair and square glasses. Spoke first. No preamble. Just a question. How did you do it? Voice steady, but urgent. Leah blinked. Which part? A few people chuckled softly. Not mocking this time. Surprised. Admiring. The override, someone clarified. The layered breach. The subshell nesting. All of it. Leah's fingers curled around her pencil. She felt the old nervousness rising. The kind that told her adults didn't want her real answers. Just confirmation of what they already believed. But this time, no one interrupted. No one dismissed her. They were waiting. Listening. She looked around the room. Then said, as honestly as she could, I don't know how to explain it with words. Silence followed. Not awkward. Not disappointed. Just open. Leah reached into her backpack and pulled out her notebook. She flipped to a blank page. But I can show you. Her pencil scratched softly against the paper. As the room watched. She didn't look up. What she drew wasn't code. Not exactly. Not diagrams either. It was something in between. Circuits that turned into tree branches. Loops that curved into river paths. Color patterns that flowed like weather maps. She shaded with quick precision, connecting components to symbols only she fully understood. She didn't label anything. Didn't pause to explain. She just built. The same way she built mental frameworks in her head when tackling code. After several minutes, she turned the page around and slid it forward on the table. No one moved at first. Then Marcus, seated across from her, arms folded, a thoughtful crease between his brows, reached out and pulled it toward him. He didn't ask what it meant. He studied it in silence, turning the page sideways, his eyes scanning the image not like an engineer, but like a man looking for something beyond the surface. Leah watched him carefully. Not because she was hoping for praise, she didn't expect that. But because this moment wasn't about systems anymore. It was about being seen. He kept turning the page in his hands, slowly, as if the right angle would unlock something. Then, suddenly, he stopped. His fingers froze on the edge. Leah saw his shoulders shift. Barely. But enough. He saw it. Not the drawing exactly, but what the drawing was. A map. Not to the breach. Not to the solution. To her. A way in. To understand how she thought. How she moved through problems. How she made sense of things too big for conventional steps. She hadn't given them code. Or flowcharts. Or bullet-pointed logic. She had given them her mind. In the only language it spoke freely. And Marcus saw it. The others leaned in now, slowly. Sensing something important was happening. Even if they didn't yet understand what it was. But Leah could tell. Marcus wasn't analyzing anymore. He was remembering. Something she couldn't name. But could feel. In the way he looked at her now. Not like an anomaly. Not like a miracle. Like a person. Like someone who'd once felt this kind of thinking from the inside. Leah shifted slightly in the chair, unsure what to say. She hadn't planned this. She hadn't expected to be sitting in a room full of adults. Who weren't arguing. Weren't condescending. Who were just quiet. Because for once, she had filled the silence. With something they couldn't deny. She reached for her notebook. Then paused. When Marcus finally looked up, his face had softened. Not in pity. In understanding. He didn't say thank you. He didn't nod in approval. He just tapped the page once and asked, "This loop here, what do you call it?" She blinked. "It doesn't really have a name. It's just how I keep the structure from collapsing when the problem folds on itself." He nodded slowly. "That's exactly what happened yesterday, isn't it?" She hesitated. Then nodded. "Yeah." He slid the paper back toward her. "Keep this. Don't change it." Leah tucked it back into her notebook like it was nothing. But her heart was pounding. For the first time, she felt like she hadn't just solved something. She'd spoken something. And he'd listened. And when she handed him the drawing, he turned it sideways and saw exactly what it was. A way in. Not to the system. To her.
It does not arrive all at once, but slowly thickens, first turning the edges of the land soft and blue, then black and formless. And soon you cannot see where the sky ends and the earth begins. You sit close to the fire. It crackles faintly, sending smoke upward in thin lines. Its warmth touches only the front of your body. Behind you, the cold settles in. Not aggressive, but persistent. Like a blanket woven from silence. And that is when you begin to feel it. The night watching you. It does not speak. It does not move. But it is there. You sense it in the way your horse shifts its weight nearby. Ears flicking at something unseen. In the way the wind quiets suddenly. As if holding its breath. This is not fear. It is awareness. The Mongol does not fear the night. But he respects it. He knows that the darkness has eyes of its own. Eyes that belong to wolves. To owls. To spirits whispered of intents long ago. He knows the land does not sleep. It only hides. The stars appear, one by one. Sharp and cold. They do not blink. They do not comfort. They simply observe. A silent audience to whatever unfolds below. Your fellow riders settle in, wrapped in cloaks and quiet. A few speak in hushed tones. A few hum old songs, barely louder than thought. Most say nothing. Somewhere beyond the circle of light. A twig snaps. You do not reach for your bow. Not yet. You listen. You let the night speak first. And sometimes it says nothing. But still you feel it. In your back. In your shoulders. In the stillness between heartbeats. Out here, you learn not to believe you are alone. Just because you cannot see. The night does not need to be cruel. It only needs to be known. So you lie down near the embers. Your head wrapped. Your blade within reach. Not in fear. But in understanding. And as your eyes begin to close, you think not of safety. But of vigilance. Not yours. But the night's. Because as you sleep, something is watching. Not to harm. Not even to judge. Only to know that you were here. Briefly. Among the grasses and the stars. And in the dark. The land remembers. At last, all else has faded. The food is gone. The fire is low. And the camp has gone quiet. Save for the soft shuffling of horses. And the distant sigh of wind moving across the grass. You lie down, not on a bed, but on earth. Your saddle becomes your pillow. Your robe, your blanket. The ground is not kind, but it is honest. It holds your weight with no complaint. You shift once, then again, finding the hollow where your shoulder settles best. You feel the coolness creeping in beneath your knees, but you no longer resist it. This is not comfort as you once knew it. There are no soft linens, no walls to hold the heat, no silence born of safety. But still, you sleep. Because the body, when it has given enough, when it has ridden far enough, learns how to take rest like a gift. Sleep here does not come with ceremony. It simply arrives. A quiet descent. Like dusk falling over the mountains. You feel your thoughts slow. Your eyes, dry from wind and dust, grow heavy. Your fingers uncurl. Your breath lengthens. And in this moment, you are neither warrior nor wanderer. You are not a son, not a scout, not even a soldier. You are simply a body, granted a brief stillness. By the same land you marched across. Around you, others are doing the same. Not speaking, just lying still, their backs to the stars, their dreams thin and worn like old saddlebags. Even in rest, the army breathes as one. Some mutter prayers beneath their breath. Some keep one eye open. Some dream of past rides, or of fires that no longer burn. But all of them, all of you, are held for now in the deep, quiet arms of exhaustion. And it is here, beneath the endless sky, with no walls, no roof, only the cold and the company of silence, that you understand the mercy of sleep. Not pleasure, not luxury, but mercy. It does not heal your wounds. It does not promise safety, but it gives you the only thing you need, to rise again tomorrow. A few hours of peace, in a world that rarely allows it. And just before sleep takes you completely, you feel the earth below you, solid and still. You hear the faint snort of a horse, the whisper of someone shifting nearby, the wind passing overhead, carrying your breath away into the dark. And then, nothing, just the dark, and sleep, and the steady, silent world, holding you without question. Dawn returns as it always does. Not with ceremony, but with subtle shifts. The cold lifts, just slightly. The dark fades at the edges. A faint blue creeps into the sky, like ink dropped into water. And before the first voice is heard, before any command is spoken, the horde begins to move. Not with a rush, not with noise, but with discipline, so deeply woven into each man, that it feels like instinct. No horns, no alarms, no shouted roll calls, just movement. You rise with the others, your robes still damp with sleep, your eyes not fully open, but your hands already know what to do. Your saddle is lifted, checked, tied. Your horse is brushed, fed, watered. Your gear is packed in the same order it was unpacked, as if each strap and pouch knows its place. All around you, this quiet choreography repeats. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of riders, moving together like a slow tide returning to sea. There is no scrambling, no confusion. Each man knows his role, his place in the line, his distance from the next. This is not discipline of fear. It is discipline of knowing. The horde is not a mob. It is an organism. One body with many legs, moving as one. Even when spread across miles of open land, scouts ride first, already silhouettes against the rising sun. They carry no banners. Their loyalty is shown in how far they ride ahead, how little they sleep, how fast they return when needed. Then come the main riders, grouped by clan, by company, by bonds that go back generations. Each group watches the one beside it, not as rivals, but as limbs of the same body. Behind them ride the carts, creaking softly, carrying supplies, weapons, spare bows, meat drying in the wind. Women and children, too, in some parts of the horde, riding alongside the warriors, not separate, not shielded, but woven into the march. And at the rear, more scouts, more eyes. The horde sees in every direction. It leaves nothing to chance. There is no shouting, no rushing, no hesitation. Each hoofbeat, each wheel turn, each breath is part of a greater rhythm, a song without sound. And so, the Mongol army moves forward again, not by accident, not by command, but by memory, by trust, by a discipline that lives in the bones. Long after words have faded, the march continues. The line of riders stretches across the land, a slow-moving thread stitched through open space. You might expect noise, drums, commands, the shouts of men corralling chaos into motion. But here there is none of that. Only silence. Orders, when they come, are rare, and they are soft, passed from rider to rider like whispers caught in wind. A hand gesture, a nod, a glance over the shoulder that means turn. That means slow. That means stay alert.
Marcus knew it broke protocol. He knew it the moment he told his driver to take a left into the hills, and not toward the office. He said no to the black SUV, no to the security escort, no to the nervous assistant trying to hand him a folder of talking points. What he wanted now wasn't in a document. It was in a little girl's home, a place no one in his boardroom would have dared to enter. When he stepped out of the cab at the base of the narrow alley, he felt it. The shift. Not in the surroundings. In himself. This was the first time in years. He was walking somewhere, without being expected. He had to ask twice for the right door. When it finally creaked open, Leah's mother froze at the sight of him. Eyes wide, broom in hand. "You're Mr. Vale," she said. Half whisper, half fear. Her instinct wasn't pride. It was panic. Did she do something wrong? She didn't mean to, she did everything right, Marcus interrupted. His voice was calm, but firm. "I just came to see her world. I promise it's nothing bad." But Leah's mother didn't relax. She nodded slowly, stepped aside, still watching him, as though waiting for the twist in the story. Leah sat cross-legged on the floor, a plastic tray of wires and resistors spread out in front of her, as if nothing about the moment required adjusting. She didn't run to greet him. She didn't seem surprised. She simply looked up, held out an old, cracked radio, and asked, "Can you fix this one?" No greeting. No nerves. Just a challenge, plain and honest. Marcus took the radio from her carefully, weighing its age, its damage, its silence. "I used to," he said. "A long time ago." "Then try," she replied, handing him a screwdriver like she was passing a baton. He crouched down, knees aching more than he cared to admit, and started prying the back open, his fingers slow from years of corporate detachment. Leah watched without commentary, just quiet expectation. Her mother hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene, until a small boy came barreling out of the back room, with a fork in one hand and an empty plate in the other. "Is there more?" he shouted. "Only if someone flips the next batch," Leah called back. "Your turn, Mario." The boy groaned, but ran to the stove anyway. Marcus blinked. "Is he your brother?" "Cousin," she said. "He lives here now." Everyone kind of does. That explained the mattress against the wall, the dishes in a bucket, the 3 toothbrushes in a single cup by the door, while Mario burned the edges of the pancakes. And Leah's mother explained she only used the stove's middle burner because the others sparked too much. Marcus sat in a corner with the broken radio in his lap, feeling strangely out of place, and yet more grounded than he had in months. He watched as Leah knelt beside Mario and pointed to a capacitor on a small breadboard. "If it's too weak," she explained, "the charge bleeds out before it can flip the signal. You need to match the resistance." "That's not fair," Mario complained. "I don't even know what resistance is." "Then learn," she said, unbothered. "That's how I did it." Marcus didn't interrupt. He just watched. No toys. No screens. No distractions. The living room was a tangle of wires. Notebooks filled with sketches. Old parts pulled from radios, fans, broken DVD players. Everything was repurposed. Everything was learned the hard way. He realized then. What he'd seen in her at the terminal wasn't trained precision. It was survival. Not the panicked kind. The determined kind. The kind that builds itself from scraps and still dares to function. He finally spoke after the third failed attempt at rewiring the transistor. "Where did you learn how to do all this?" He held up a barely salvageable switchboard she'd fused together. "Nowhere," Leah replied. "It just started making sense one day. Like math, but with sparks." "When?" She turned to Mario and said, "He didn't even know what a diode was 2 weeks ago. Now he can test polarity without burning his fingers." "That was one time," Mario yelled from the kitchen. "One really big spark." Leah muttered, "Really big." Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time since this entire ordeal began. It caught him off guard. "You didn't wait for someone to teach you," he said. More to himself than to her. "You just kept going." Leah shrugged. "I had to." No bitterness in her tone. Just fact. She didn't say it like a complaint. She didn't even seem aware there was anything unusual about it. That was what struck him most. She didn't act like someone who'd been wronged. She acted like someone who'd accepted the terms of the world and quietly rewritten the rules in her favor. As they sat down with plates of lopsided pancakes, Marcus looked around again. At the cracked tiles, the hanging wires, the fan that buzzed but didn't turn. And still, it wasn't the poverty that struck him. It was the focus. Every surface had a function. Every object had potential. She had built a lab from a junkyard. A school from silence. And most unbelievably, she'd done it without falling into cynicism. No anger. No hunger for revenge or attention. Just curiosity. Hunger for knowledge. Leah passed him a small page from her notebook. Another drawing. This one had pancakes in the margins. But in the center, a diagram of a circuit loop designed to store intermittent charges. "I figured out how to store power without a battery," she said. "For emergencies." Marcus didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to respond to a child who had found electricity and broken things and turned it into her own language. He only knew what he felt. A sharp sense of guilt. A quieter sense of awe. And the growing realization that the system hadn't discovered her. She'd simply become too brilliant for it to keep ignoring. And somehow, she had done it without bitterness. Like a plant through concrete. Marcus left Leah's home that evening, with something lodged in his chest that didn't go away. It followed him back into his polished office, trailed him through a conference call he couldn't focus on, and sat beside him while his legal team droned on about liability clauses and corporate exposure. He heard none of it.
And everyone understands. You are not told what to do at every moment. You are expected to know. This is the discipline of trust, of years spent learning without being taught, of obedience not born from fear, but from belonging. The Mongol rider does not wait to be told to stay in formation. He is the formation. He moves as part of a body. That does not require instruction to breathe. When something shifts, when the land ahead looks different, when the wind smells wrong, when the birds lift in sudden spirals, the riders notice. They don't panic. They adjust. A curve in the line. A halt, quiet and immediate. A scout breaks off without needing to ask. The silence is not emptiness. It is awareness. Every man is listening, not to voices, but to the language of motion. If a cry is heard, it matters, because it is rare. If a leader speaks aloud, the entire column listens, because it means something has changed. But mostly, there is just the hum of hooves, the breathing of horses, the creak of worn leather shifting with each step. Even the wind respects this quiet. It moves around the column like a tide around a stone, present but not pressing. And you, too, begin to understand. That silence is not the absence of leadership. It is the presence of certainty. It means you know what to do, and so does the man beside you. And that, more than shouts or speeches, is what holds this horde together. Not fear, not force, but the still, soundless space between each command, where trust lives. You ride, and to the untrained eye, it looks slow, measured, almost idle. But that's the trick. There is speed here, not in frantic bursts, but in readiness, like a bow drawn quietly, waiting only for release. The Mongol horde does not race forward without thought. It holds speed beneath stillness, the way a hawk hovers, wings wide, motionless until the dive. Each rider is calm, but watchful. Each horse relaxed, but alert. The quiet pace of the march is not laziness. It is conservation. Why gallop when the land is long? Why exhaust your mount before the battle? Speed is a resource. And here, every resource is guarded like gold. Yet when needed, when a signal is given, or danger appears, or prey is spotted on the horizon, the stillness cracks. And suddenly, you see what they've been hiding. A shift in posture, a subtle squeeze of the legs, a whistle passed along the line, and the horde begins to move. Not just fast, fluid. They do not need to gather. They do not wait for formation. They are formation. The horses know. They surge forward as if launched from stillness. And the plain, so wide and calm a moment ago, becomes a sea of motion. It's not chaos. It's design. Reflex turned into strategy. Speed is not their weapon. Precision is. They can halt just as quickly. They can disappear into silence again, without breaking the line, without leaving confusion behind. And when the dust settles, when hooves stop and the wind has its breath again, the column resumes its slow, steady rhythm, as if nothing had happened, as if that burst of speed was a ripple on still water, not a roar. You begin to understand that the horde is not made of warriors who wait for commands. It is made of men who prepare for motion in every quiet moment. And so, they carry speed, like a blade kept sheathed, always near, always ready, but never drawn without cause, in a formation that stretches for miles, where riders vanish into heat, shimmer, and dust, where no stone marks a road, and no walls guide the way. How does the shape stay whole? How does a body this large not unravel into disorder? The answer is quiet, simple, and constant. The center holds, not a place, but a principle. Not a leader shouting from the front, but a pulse that travels outward, felt more than heard. At the heart of the horde rides its soul. Not just generals or banners, but the trusted. The riders who know every curve of this land, every rhythm of this army. They don't ride faster than others. They ride right. They carry the lineage of knowledge, the memory of formations across generations, of rivers crossed in flood, of battles turned by one wise turn. And around them, the others move. They do not follow like sheep. They align like stars, each in motion, but part of a pattern. The outer bands look outward. They watch for danger, for opportunity. The flanks move with the freedom to shift, but they never lose the line that runs back to the center. If a rider is lost, he returns to it. If a group splits, they curve back inward, because they trust that something stable remains. Even in retreat, even in dispersal, the center endures. It is the place the formation breathes from, the part that remembers why they ride, not just where. And more than any flag, more than any war cry, this living core, is what keeps the horde from breaking. You might not notice it as you ride. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't glow or hum or demand loyalty. It just is. And when night falls again, when the column draws into rest, you'll find yourself not drifting aimlessly, but circling slowly back toward the familiar, toward warmth, toward structure, toward center. And when morning returns, you'll ride again, not in confusion, but with certainty, because the land changes, the enemies change, even the sky changes. But the center? The center holds. By midday, the horde has already traveled many miles. And yet, if you were to look back, if you were to turn your horse and scan the horizon, you would see nothing. No deep ruts in the soil. No broken fences or trampled crops. No discarded banners. Not even smoke lingering in the air. The Mongol army moves like wind. It passes over the earth, not through it. The trail it leaves behind is not one of destruction, but of disappearance. This, too, is discipline, an art refined through generations. The ability to move with power, without leaving the ground wounded. You might imagine an army this large would scar the landscape, that it would burn forests, drain rivers, carve roads into the land like veins. But instead, it leaves almost nothing. A patch of grass flattened here, a small ash circle where a fire once breathed. And even these will vanish by morning wind. Why? Because permanence is not the Mongol way. To move is to survive. To linger is to die. They carry what they need. No wagons heavy with luxury. No grand kitchens or gilded tents. Everything has a place. Everything has a purpose. And when it no longer does, it is buried, burned, or passed on. Even waste is handled with care. The land must remain fertile. The horses must feed tomorrow, where they ride today. So the horde becomes part of the steppe, not a burden upon it. You ride forward and see only more land, more sky, more grass bending softly in the breeze. You look behind and see nothing, as if you had never been there at all. It is strange comfort to be part of something so vast, and yet so light on the world. You are not building empires from stone. You are not carving your name into mountains. You are moving, and movement, done well, leaves no bruise, just memory, and wind, and the quiet knowledge that an army passed here once, not as conquerors, not yet, but as riders between moments, present, and then gone. In the Mongol world, a man is not measured first by his sword, nor by his words, nor even by his ancestors, but by his horse. Because out here, on the endless steppe where sky meets grass and the horizon is your only map, the horse is not merely transportation. It is survival. It is warmth in winter, speed in battle, milk in drought. It is, quite simply, a second self.
All he could think about was the little girl who handed him a circuit loop, drawn in the margins of a pancake recipe. The next morning, before his staff even clocked in, he rewrote Virion's internship policy from the ground up. Age restrictions gone. Minimum GPA modified. Background checks and digital portfolios optional. He didn't wait for approvals. He didn't need to. He was the final signature. Then he contacted legal again. This time to establish a scholarship fund under the company's name. But not for prodigies from elite schools. Not for polished resumes or pre-approved futures. For minds like Leah's. Raw. Unseen. Brilliant in the places no one was looking. And finally, in a move no one expected, he renamed the rebuilt internal firewall. Not after himself. Not after some arbitrary product line. He named it Elia Protect. A silent nod to the girl, who walked into a disaster, and held it together better than any grown man in the room. But even as he did all of it, something felt unfinished. It wasn't that he doubted the gesture. It was right. It was necessary. But it wasn't personal enough. What Leah had given them, what she had given him, wasn't just a solution. It was a mirror. A challenge. A reminder of something he had long buried. No plaque or scholarship could answer that. It had to come from him, directly. So he called her mother. He didn't use an assistant. Didn't filter it through anyone else. He dialed the number himself. And asked, awkwardly, nervously, if they would come back to the office. Just for a conversation. Nothing formal. Just something real. Her mother agreed, though her voice cracked at the end, like she couldn't quite believe it. When they arrived, Marcus didn't take them to a side office or an HR conference room. He brought them to the boardroom, the same room where decisions were made about millions of dollars, partnerships, company futures. He wanted Leah to know that this space now included her, that it belonged to her, too. She didn't seem overwhelmed. If anything, she looked bored. But she sat down, notebook in hand, as always. Her mother sat stiffly, clutching her purse like it might vanish. Marcus cleared his throat. Too many times. Then finally, "You changed the way we see things here," he said to Leah. "Not just systems. People. Talent. The way we define who's qualified to lead. You walked into chaos and didn't flinch. You didn't wait for permission. You just solved it." Her mother tried to smile, but her eyes filled with tears almost instantly. Marcus looked between them and continued, "I've made some changes. There's a scholarship in your name. And I've opened a new mentorship program. Real mentorship. One-on-one. You'll have access to labs, hardware, courses. Anything you need to keep growing." Her mother let out a sound. Something between a gasp and a sob, covering her mouth. But Leah didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She just tilted her head slightly, as if filtering his words through an internal logic gate. A new string of input data she wasn't yet sure how to process. "You'll be on site," Marcus added. "Not just as a visitor. As part of the team. If you want that." He waited, feeling strangely nervous. Like she might say no. Like she might shrug and walk away from everything he'd worked so hard to offer. Leah looked at her mother, then back at Marcus. Her voice was quiet, but not shy. "Will I still be allowed to break things?" The question didn't come from fear. It came from understanding. Breaking things was how she learned. It was how she uncovered meaning in machines others had given up on. It was her way of translating the world. If this offer came with rules that suffocated her method, she wasn't interested. Marcus stared at her, caught between laughter and disbelief. And then, slowly, genuinely, he smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a boardroom smile. A real one. His first in years. Yes, he said. That's how we find out what's inside. Her mother let out a breath that broke apart at the end. She cried then, fully. Head lowered. Tears falling freely into her lap. Leah didn't move to comfort her. She didn't need to. Her hand slid across the table and found her mother's fingers. That was enough. The boardroom fell quiet after that. But it wasn't the kind of silence that needed filling. It was full. Solid. Marcus stood, then reached into the folder beside him and slid a small card across the table. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a schedule. It was a badge. Virion Technologies. Leah, access, full. You can come in tomorrow, he said. Or next week. Or next month. The lab's yours when you're ready. Leah picked it up without ceremony. Turned it over in her hand. I'll come tomorrow, she said. Marcus nodded once. Then turned toward the window, blinking harder than necessary. He wasn't just offering her something. She was offering him something too. A second chance to build a legacy. That didn't just look good on paper, but mattered. Something human. Something honest. The system had survived the breach, yes. But more importantly, it had gained something it never knew it needed. And when he brought Leah and her mother into the boardroom and offered full-time mentorship, her mother cried. Leah didn't. She just looked at him and said, "Will I still be allowed to break things?" He smiled. The first real smile in years. Yes. That's how we find out what's inside. Months passed. Not with spectacle or ceremony, but with quiet momentum. The kind that builds something lasting. Leah became a fixture at Virion. Not as a novelty. Not as a token. But as a presence. Every morning. She rode the bus with her mother. Still sitting side by side in the front row. Still sharing silence more than words. Her hoodie was the same, though the elbows had been patched now. And her notebook had expanded to a second volume. This one thicker. Full of observations, questions, and blueprints of things she hadn't yet told anyone she was building. At Virion, she had her own access badge. White background, red trim. Her name in bold. Leah M. No last name listed. None needed. She had her own corner of the lab. And though it wasn't a private office, no one touched her space. Above the monitor, an enormous screen that made her look even smaller than she was. Someone had written, Leah's brain, in permanent marker. No one admitted who, but she didn't erase it. She liked it there. Engineers brought her snacks. Interns asked for her opinion. Department heads paused outside her station, just to see what she was up to. But she didn't perform. She just did what she always had. She worked. What had changed was how they saw her. And, perhaps more importantly, how she saw herself.
You do not choose a horse the way you choose a tool. You do not look for the strongest, or the tallest, or the most beautiful. You look for one that understands you. The Mongol steed is small by some standards. Compact, stocky, closer to the ground. Its frame is built for endurance, not elegance. It doesn't need to impress. It only needs to last. And last it does. It survives bitter winters with no stable. Finds grass buried beneath snow. Crosses rivers swollen with ice. Endures weeks on sparse grazing. All while carrying a man. His weapons. His hopes. You learn the horse's language slowly. By how it breathes. By how it snorts before a sudden turn. By how it watches the world. Ears swiveling. head lowering just so. Before a change in terrain. You don't name it the way others do. Names belong to people. What you share with a horse is older than names. Before a campaign, you do not simply saddle up the nearest mount. You know your companion. You've ridden him across rivers and over hills. You know his moods, and he knows your silences. He will not gallop until you are ready. And when you are, he will fly. The Mongol rider may carry several horses, not because one is weak, but because each has its time. A horse for morning, a horse for cold, a horse for the final charge, each treated with care, groomed by hand, spoken to softly when the night winds howl. You do not love them like pets. You respect them like brothers. And when one falls, you bury him, or offer him to the sky, with no words, but with quiet grief, because you do not ride alone. Even when no one else is near, you are never alone. Your horse listens to your breathing, to your heart, to the sound of danger before you hear it yourself. Choosing a horse is not about ownership. It is about trust. And once you have that, once you have chosen, and been chosen, you no longer walk upon the land. You float across it. Two beings, moving as one, carried always forward by muscle, and memory, and wind. There are no stables on the open plain, no manicured paddocks, no trainers with whistles or polished reins. The steppe itself is the teacher, and the lesson is always the same. Endure. From the moment a Mongol foal is born, it breathes in cold wind, and learns to stand on uneven earth. Its legs are tested not by handlers, but by distance. Its instincts are sharpened by predators, by sudden storms, by the vastness of space where there is no shelter, only motion. These horses are not broken in. They are raised with. They live alongside people, but not beneath them. They learn to follow the herd, to recognize the sound of a sling or bowstring, to read the sky for signs of change. A young horse is never kept idle. From early on it moves. It is led, then ridden lightly, not with spurs or harsh yanks, but with patience. Riding is not a privilege for these animals. It is their role, and they accept it not with submission, but with calm repetition. They know the rhythm of the horde, when to start, when to pause, when to push harder. The steppe does not pamper. It prepares. Its open spaces demand awareness. A misstep can mean injury. A delay can mean separation. So the hoof becomes smart, learning to find solid footing in snow, to climb ridges without slipping, to cross shallow streams and bogs with care. Shoes? Rare. The steppe horse's hoof grows strong through exposure, not protection. It is trimmed not with tools, but with use. And because these horses graze freely, they learn to forage efficiently. They eat tough grasses, find roots when needed, and move constantly. Their muscles lean, their lungs wide, their hearts steady. They rest standing. They rise quickly. They travel without fear. It is said that a Mongol horse can run all day, rest a few hours, and run again. Not because it is commanded, but because it was made that way, by the land itself. This is not the beauty of display. It is the beauty of function. To watch them move across the plains is to see an animal in harmony with its purpose. No wasted motion, no anxiety, only presence. The steppe has taught them this, with wind and hunger, with distance and dust, and in return, they carry the dreams of empires. In their quiet, pounding hooves, a Mongol horse remembers everything, not in the way a man does, not through stories or words, but through the body. It remembers the paths it's taken, the scent of distant rivers, the slope of a hill passed 3 winters ago, the way your weight shifted in the saddle when a storm came in fast from the west. These horses don't need reins to know where to go. They feel the journey beneath their hooves, and they recall it. Even in silence, they know what comes next. They remember the feel of battle, not the blood or the cries, but the rhythm, the gallop into danger, the sudden turn, the breathless stillness before the charge. They remember the tension in your legs when you brace for impact, the tightness in your hands when you drew the bow. They felt it all, and they carry it with them. But they remember peace, too. The long rides without urgency, the cool water shared at twilight, the soft grooming beside a fire after a hard day. They remember your scent, your voice, the sound of your breathing when you finally fell asleep beneath the stars. To a Mongol horse, you are not just a rider. You are a presence they have mapped with their senses. Familiar, known. If you fall behind, they wait. If you are wounded, they listen. They do not panic. They adapt. Even in the dark, even among the chaos of a moving horde, your horse will find you, because it remembers how you move, how you sit, how you speak. In a world with no fences, no signs, no fixed homes, memory is the only guide. And horses have long memories. They carry it in the way they turn toward shelter when the sky darkens, in the way they quicken their pace, on trails they've taken before. They remember not only what was, but how it felt, and they forgive, even when pushed too far, even when asked to cross one more hill with little food and no water. They do not break away. They bend, they endure, and then they rise again. So when you ride across the plain tomorrow, you may not think of these things, but your horse will. He will remember every hill, every command, every pause, and every silence. He will remember you, because out here, memory is not kept in books. It is kept in bodies that never stop moving. You do not speak to a Mongol horse in words, at least not in the way you speak to people. Out here, language takes on a quieter form, simpler, older, and much more honest. It begins with breath. When you approach your horse, you do not rush. You exhale, slowly, letting your body settle, letting your heartbeat slow, because he will feel it. Not just hear you, but sense you. Your presence begins in your breath. Then come the airs. Not yours, his. They swivel constantly. Left, right, forward, back. Not at random. Each flick tells you something. A forward ear means attention, alertness, interest. One turn back might mean fatigue, or listening to the rider behind. Two pin flat? Something's wrong. You learn to read these signs the way others read expressions. A horse's ears tell you what no voice will. They are his eyes turned inside out. Then, the movement. You learn to guide him not by pulling, but by leaning.
No longer an outsider, peering into someone else's world. She now built it from the inside. Her input wasn't second-guessed. When she suggested a redesign to a data funneling protocol, it was implemented. When she found a logic error in a third-party security package, vendors listened. But none of that changed what she did at home. She still scavenged broken toys on the walk from the bus stop, still disassembled discarded radios and ancient calculators, harvesting their insides, like a magician pulling stories from forgotten places. Her mother no longer asked if she was tired. She just placed tea beside her and let her work. Their apartment hadn't expanded, but the energy inside it had. Leah still didn't talk much about Virion at home. Not because she didn't want to, but because some things were too sacred to say aloud. Her mother understood. The way she tucked away Leah's badge into the drawer each night, like it was something holy, told Leah everything she needed to know. At the office, Marcus changed too, though he was far less comfortable with it. His schedule remained full. His calendar still color-coded to the minute. But his office had changed in subtle ways. The biggest shift: a small frame on the edge of his desk. Inside it, Leah's drawing. The one she had slid across the table months ago. Full of circuits and trees and loops and rivers. He hadn't touched it. Hadn't scanned or digitized it. Just framed the original page. With its pencil smudges. And folded edge. Whenever board meetings dragged. Or negotiations dulled into numbers. His eyes wandered there. And he remembered. He remembered what it had felt like. To watch her speak in code. Without saying a word. To realize she had taught herself. Not just how to fix the system. But how to see it differently. More than once. He found himself walking down to the lab. Without a reason. Pretending to check on something. Leah would glance up. Nod. Then go back to work. She never asked why he came. He never explained. But they both understood. Sometimes, proximity was enough. Just knowing someone else knew what you were made of. And yet, for all that growth, for all the press that tried to cover the girl who saved the system, Leah never leaned into it. She never sought interviews. Never posed for pictures. When a journalist once asked for a quote, she said only, "I liked the problem." That was Leah. She wasn't chasing recognition. She was chasing the next pattern. The next riddle. That needed a new kind of thinking. And she found plenty of them. On napkins. In software logs. In the inconsistent behavior of small AI tests. She filled notebooks. With solutions to questions no one had asked yet. And late one evening, after everyone else had gone home, and the lab lights had dimmed to their nighttime setting, she stood in Marcus's office. Her notebook was tucked under her arm. He wasn't there. He'd left earlier for a late dinner with investors. She didn't wait. She placed a note on his desk. Just a torn scrap of lined paper, folded twice. On it, in small, careful handwriting, were 7 words. "Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me." Marcus found the note hours later. The office was still. The city lit beneath him. He hadn't expected anything when he returned. Just a quiet desk. The usual late-night review. But the note was there. Right beside the drawing. He sat down slowly. Unfolded the paper. Read the words once. Then again. His hand stilled. His eyes burned. No one was there to witness it. And he was glad. Because for the first time in as long as he could remember, he didn't feel like the system he'd built defined him. It was the girl who had cracked its walls and stepped through, who reminded him what it meant to create something real. Not just code, not just machines, but trust, recognition. He sat there for a long time, the note still open in his hand, letting the moment linger, letting the walls fall just a little. And for the first time, he didn't feel alone. And somewhere, in that glass tower, a little girl with well-stained fingers dreamed of stars and knew, deep down, that she belonged. We're a small team behind this channel, and every story you watch here is created with a lot of care, thought, and love, always thinking of you. If this video touched you in any way, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us keep telling meaningful, heartfelt stories like this one. We'd also love to hear from you. What part of Leah's journey stayed with you the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story moved you, don't forget to give it a like and check out the other videos we've made. Thank you for watching.
A subtle shift in your hips. A change in weight. A tightening of your knees. He feels it all. Not like a machine receiving input, but like a friend sensing your intention. He knows when you are uncertain, and he slows. He knows when you are confident, and he flies. The rhythm of your breathing, the position of your heels, the silence between your movements. This becomes your shared language. You may speak aloud sometimes, a word of comfort, a murmur under your breath, but he responds more to tone than to content, more to rhythm than to meaning. And over time, you stop needing even that. You find that your silences become fluent, that the space between actions is where trust grows. The horse listens to you, not for commands, but for presence. And you learn to listen to him, not just his hooves, but his sighs, his quiet, chewing pauses, the way he holds his head when danger is near. This is not control. It is conversation, unwritten, unspoken, undeniable. And once you know it, once you begin to hear in the flick of an ear what others miss in 100 words, you will never ride the same again. Because now, you speak a new language, in breath, in posture, in stillness, and out on the steppe, where so little is said aloud. It is the only language that truly matters. There is a moment, if you're lucky, after weeks on the open steppe, after rain and wind and long hours without speaking, when you and your horse cease to be two things. You do not notice it right away. It's not a sudden change, not a revelation, just a quiet unfolding. You lean slightly forward, and he begins to move, without needing a signal. You pause, and he waits, not out of training, but out of rhythm. The line between rider and mount fades. You begin to feel the ground through his hooves, the way he shifts his weight to balance your pack, the way his muscles tighten a moment before a sudden change in slope. Your body adjusts to him, his to yours. You no longer ride your horse. You move with him. And out here, that matters. It means when the herd turns, you turn effortlessly. It means when the scouts call for speed, you answer as one. There's no command, no tension, only movement. Other armies rely on ranks, on drills, on shouting captains with polished swords. But the Mongol horde relies on something quieter. This unity between horse and rider. This unseen tether of mutual understanding. To ride as one means more than victory. It means endurance. It means crossing 50 miles of open grass without once needing to stop. It means sleeping with your hand on the saddle and waking to the gentle nudge of a warm nose at dawn. It means trust, not blind obedience, but real, lived trust. The kind that comes only through distance, through hardship, through time. You look at the other riders beside you. Their faces dusty, their eyes steady, each one moving in sync with their horse. Not as masters, not as owners, but as halves of a single purpose. There is no ceremony for this, no badge, no moment when someone says, "You have become a true rider." But it happens, quietly, fully, and from that day on, the steppe no longer feels vast. It feels shared, between you, your horse, and the wind that carries you both. Before a man learns to ride, before he draws a bow or dons a coat of lamellar armor, he must first learn how to live. And for the Mongol, this learning begins not in a school, nor in a courtyard, but beneath an open sky, on the edge of the world. Childhood on the steppe is not a time of play, but a time of preparation. The first lessons are taught by wind, by cold that arrives early in the season, settling in with no concern for age or comfort, by summers that crack the earth dry, forcing herders to scan the distance for greener pastures, by the sounds of hoofbeats, always present, a reminder that motion is life. A Mongol child learns to walk early, and ride soon after, not on a pony in a circle, but on a real horse, Small, strong, unbothered by the inexperience atop its back. There are no reins at first. No stirrups. Only balance. And breath. And a voice calling from across the plain. Let the horse guide you. They fall. They bruise. They rise again. Fathers teach with few words. Mothers too. For Mongol women are riders, archers, herders, and keepers of fire. They show by doing, by living, by not sparing the child from the truth of the land. A boy may learn to butcher before he can recite a prayer. He will know how to clean a blade, how to dry meat for winter, how to feel the sky for coming rain. Not because someone told him, but because he watched, and followed, and failed, and tried again. Games are not idle. They are training. Children wrestle not for glory, but for resilience. They shoot arrows at bones, at scraps of cloth, at nothing at all. So their fingers learn the string. So their eyes learn the silence between breath and flight. They sleep beside animals, wake at dawn to gather dung for fuel. They know the names of every wind. They know the sound of their mother's mare. Even in the dark. This is not a childhood of softness, but neither is it cruel. It is shaping. It is growing strong by growing close to hardship. Not to become bitter, but to become capable. Because out here, there are no walls to hide behind, only openness. And in that openness, a child learns to become not just a man, but a Mongol. And one day, when his hand is steady, when his horse no longer needs the touch of reins, when the land no longer feels vast but familiar, he will ride with the others, not as a boy, not as a son, but as part of the horde. Strength, in the world of the Mongols, was never just about muscle. It was not the loudest voice, not the tallest frame, not the one who could throw an enemy the farthest. Strength meant something quieter. It meant endurance. The ability to wake before the frost had lifted. To tend to the herd while your fingers were still numb. To ride for hours without complaint. To eat sparingly and share what little you had. To not waver when the sky turned dark and the snow came early. Strength was not how long you could fight. It was how long you could wait. In silence. In cold. In stillness. It meant restraint. Not pulling the bowstring too soon. Not speaking when a leader spoke. Not panicking when wolves drew near at night. To be strong was to listen. To the wind. To the hoof. To your own breath inside your chest. You could not afford to be impulsive out here. One wrong move, and the herd scatters. One careless word, and the clan divides. Strength was also adaptation. To carry a wound and still ride. To switch horses mid-chase without breaking speed. To watch your family move with the seasons. Packing and unpacking their lives. Without sorrow. Without resistance. And strength, true strength, was service. The strongest did not eat first. They watched the fire while others slept. They scouted the far ridges when storms loomed. They gave their best horse to someone whose mount had fallen. Because in a land this wide, you did not survive alone. A strong man was one who could be trusted. Not just in battle, but in silence, in hunger, in winter. Boys grew up watching for these things. They admired the uncle who never lost his temper. The grandmother who could ride and stitch and command with a glance. The elder who remembered every trail. And who never once raised his voice. Because he never needed to. To be strong, a Mongol knew, was to be ready. For hardship. For motion. For sacrifice. And when the time came, you didn't prove your strength by standing tall. You proved it by bending, and not breaking. By carrying what was needed, without being asked. If you asked a Mongol warrior to choose between sword and bow, he would not hesitate. He would reach for the bow. Quietly, confidently, as if reaching for a memory. The bow was not a last resort. It was not a tool for the weak or the cautious. It was the first weapon, the oldest companion, the extension of the warrior's breath. And every boy learned to use it, long before he could grow a beard, long before he ever held a blade. It began with the draw, not just pulling the string, but understanding the breath before the motion, the feel of tension building in the shoulder, the spine, the wrist. Mongol bows were short, curved, layered with horn and sinew, not decorative, but deadly, built for power, for speed, for use on horseback. Unlike the longbows of other lands, these could be fired in motion, forward, backward, to the side, without ever slowing the horse. A boy would start by shooting at bones, at tufts of grass, at moving targets thrown by elders, sometimes with no target at all, only the rhythm of release, the practice of silence. He would carry the bow before he could carry his own saddle, sleep with it near, keep it dry, even in snow, oil it with care, never let the string grow slack. Because the bow was not just a weapon, it was discipline. It asked for patience. It asked for precision. In time, he would learn to fire 4 arrows in a heartbeat, each one finding its mark, not because he was fast, but because he was calm. And in battle, the bow made him a storm. A Mongol warrior could kill before his enemy ever saw his face. From a distance, at speed, in near silence. This was not dishonor. This was wisdom. Why risk a sword fight when you could finish a battle before it reached your camp? The blade was a last measure, a tool for when the line broke, for when the dust closed in. But the bow was strategy, elegance. Time and distance turned into power. Even chiefs and khans kept their bows close, not out of nostalgia, but out of respect. Because the horde had no walls, no castles, no fortresses. It had only what it could carry. And it carried the bow. Always the bow. Armor, in the world of the Mongols, was never meant to shine. It was not a matter of decoration, nor of weighty tradition. It was a matter of function, of movement, of life and death decided not by how much metal you wore, but by how well you could ride, aim, and adapt. To wear Mongol armor was to wear a second skin, not something to boast in, but something to survive in. It began with layers, not iron plates or golden helms, but boiled leather, tough, flexible, treated with oils and fat, stitched into overlapping strips. It moved with the body, not against it. It could stop a glancing arrow, but more importantly, it allowed the rider to breathe, to twist, to leap from the saddle and back again without catching on his own protection. Some warriors added metal, yes, lamellar pieces, small iron or bronze scales laced into rows, enough to deflect a blow, but never so much to slow the ride. Helmets were rounded, close-fitting, not for display, but to deflect, to guard without blinding. And beneath it all, simple cloth, a tunic, a padded undercoat, worn for warmth, for softness, for ease. There were no heavy boots, no heavy greaves. The Mongol did not march into war. He rode into it. His armor had to let him fire behind his shoulder, lean from the saddle, and change direction mid-gallop, because the steppe did not allow for static battles. It was a place of motion, of ambush and retreat, of chasing and circling back again. So their armor matched the land, light, enduring, worn as comfortably as a second breath. Even horses wore armor sometimes, a simple chest guard, a leather mask over the face, not elaborate, but enough to shield in motion, enough to last a raid and carry the rider home. And when the battle ended, armor was not polished. It was dried, repaired, packed for the next march. It had no need to impress, only to serve. And in that service, there was quiet beauty, not of ornament, but of trust. Armor made for motion, for the kind of war that moves with the wind, for warriors who never stopped riding. There is a myth, especially among those far from the steppe, that the Mongol warrior was nothing more than a destroyer, a wild thing with fire in his hands, and dust in his wake. But this is not how they saw themselves, and not how they lived. Beneath the storm of their campaigns, there was a code, quiet, unwritten, but deeply felt. It did not hang from banners. It was not recited before battle. It lived in gestures, in shared meals, in how one spoke to a comrade's horse, or tended a fallen enemy's wound. Honor was not loud. It was not about display. It was about balance. You did not kill without cause. You did not steal from your own. You did not strike a man who could not fight back. Discipline began in the self, then the family, then the horde. Every rider knew that a single selfish act could unravel a dozen lives. So strength was measured in restraint, in knowing when to act, and when to wait. A warrior gave to the camp what he could, not just meat from the hunt, but news from the horizon, tools repaired by hand, a story to lighten an evening fire. He obeyed his leaders, but not blindly. Obedience was not fear. It was respect, earned through wisdom and tempered speech. And when orders came, he carried them out not for glory, but because he believed in the shape of the horde, in the pattern of it, in the purpose it served. There were laws, yasa, as they called them, simple, sharp, passed down like river paths across a map. Some were harsh, some surprisingly fair. Do not lie. Do not betray. Share the hunt. Respect the faith of others. Yes, they could be cruel in war. Yes, they could burn cities and silence kings. But cruelty was not chaos. It was strategy. And when the fire died down, what remained was order. Trade routes opened. Laws were enforced. Messages passed across great distances, on the backs of riders who believed in something larger than themselves. Because the Mongol warrior knew, a sword is only useful if you know when to sheath it, and a bow is only feared if drawn with purpose. So in the silence after battle, when the camp settles, when horses doze and stars return, you can hear the shape of the code, in the way a warrior moves, not stiff with pride, not swollen with triumph, but steady, still, aware of the cost, and carrying, always, the quiet weight of being part of something vast and chosen. The steppe is vast, a wide, rolling sea of grasses, with no walls, no cities, no fixed lines between one place and the next. And yet, when the Mongol horde stops for the night, a shape forms, not by order shouted, not by map or compass, but by memory, by rhythm, by instinct. A circle, always a circle. It is the oldest form of shelter on the open earth. Not a square to defend, not a line to guard, but a circle to hold together, to gather inward. At its heart, the hearth, a cooking fire, simple, low, crackling with dried dung and bits of twigs. Around it, the elders, the guards, the officers, those who speak in low voices, not commanding, just steady. Then the carts, the supplies, the milk vessels, the spare tack, and food tucked under hide covers to keep the flies away. Further still, the jers, rounded tents of felt and wood, each placed with its door to the south, as tradition dictates. Inside, the bed always to the north, the fire always in the center. Each placement has meaning, each object a role. The animals form the outermost ring. Horses hobbled but never tied. Goats and sheep gathered close, their warmth a kind of living wall. Even they understand the shape. Even they know where they belong. To a stranger, it might look like a cluster, a rough sprawl. But if you stand back, if you watch from a hill at dusk, you see it. Order inside openness. A camp that knows how to breathe. That can vanish at sunrise and leave no trace, but for a blackened circle of earth and the hush of flattened grass. Children move freely through its curves. Dogs trot the same paths each night. Women boil milk into tea, mend harnesses, tend the small hurts of the day, and above all, the circle holds. No walls, no sentries on towers, just trust. In the formation, in the people within it, in the silence beyond it. Because the land is not theirs to enclose, it is theirs to pass through. So each night, they make a place that says, "We are here." And each morning, they move again. But the shape remains, carried not in stone, but in memory. A perfect circle, drawn again and again, upon the skin of the world. Evening comes slowly on the step. There is no sudden dusk, no abrupt end to the light, just a long softening, as the sky deepens from gold to blue, and the air grows still. The camp breathes with it. The circle holds, and in that quiet, the small rituals of rest begin. A fire is lit, not a blaze, but a steady flame, fed with dry dung collected earlier by careful hands. It does not roar. It does not demand attention. It burns low, close to the ground, with smoke that rises lazily and disappears before it reaches the stars. Nearby, a pot simmers. Inside, milk, fresh from the mare that morning, soured by the day's heat, now gently stirred into something warm and familiar. Arag, perhaps, or sutitsai, tea boiled with milk, a pinch of salt, a hint of butter. The scent drifts through the camp, not strong, but enough to call people inward. A cup is passed without words. Lips touch the rim. Hands linger on the warmth. The fire crackles softly in reply. This is not mealtime. This is not celebration. This is settling. The end of motion. Children curl beside goats. Horses stand in patient half-sleep, their tails flicking occasionally against the last of the flies. Dogs move through shadows, circling once before lying down near the fire. No one shouts. No one commands. If a voice rises, it is for a story, or a soft laugh, or a song sung low, barely more than a hum. A melody older than the fire, older than the camp. Women mend seams, men clean blades. A grandfather sharpens a tool with slow, thoughtful strokes, his hands moving as if remembering something. Long before words, there is no rush. The stars will wait, and in this pause, this delicate stretch of time between the day and the dreams, something settles in the chest, a kind of peace that does not come from silence alone, but from belonging. Here, in this moment, fire and milk, warmth and wind, all blend into a single breath, and the world, so wide by daylight, gathers in around the flame, and listens. When the sun has slipped entirely behind the hills, and the fire is little more than a whispering glow, the steppe begins to speak in softer tones, not silence, but something close to it, a hush, stretched across the plains, where every sound feels older, gentler, and more deliberate. You might hear the slow chewing of a tethered horse, his jaws working steadily. Even in the dark, the quiet clink of a metal pot being cleaned by hand, then set gently on the earth. A child's cough, a dog shifting in its sleep, legs twitching towards some distant dream of running. Wind passes through the tall grass in long, careful waves. It does not rush. It does not scream. It hums, a song without melody, but full of memory. And then there are the voices, soft, scattered, Not conversations, exactly. More like fragments. A few words pass between brothers. A murmur from a mother settling a blanket. A low chant from an elder watching the stars. Perhaps reciting a prayer. Or a piece of history. No one else remembers anymore. Occasionally, there is singing. Not for performance, but for presence. A voice alone. Untrained but steady. Floating just above the crackle of embers. Singing of rivers long gone. Of fathers buried in distant soil. Of horses that returned after long winters. No one claps. No one interrupts. The song ends the way the fire does. By fading gently. Without farewell. Some sounds don't come from people at all. The distant call of a night bird. The hollow thud of hooves shifting weight. The faintest sound of water flowing somewhere unseen. Half a mile away. Beneath stone and root. Even dreams seem to carry their own sounds. Memories that arrive not with pictures, but with echoes. And when you lie down, wrapped in a blanket that smells of smoke and felt, the ground firm beneath your shoulder, you do not long for silence. You listen to what lingers, to the breath of the horde, as it rests beside you, alive in every sigh and shuffle, woven into every note the wind carries. These are not distractions. They are reminders that even in stillness, the world moves, that even at rest, you are never alone. Morning does not arrive with a jolt on the step. It comes gently, in shifts of color, in quiet movements, in the slow undoing of sleep. Before the sun shows its full face, the sky begins to pale, washed in soft tones of ash blue and rose. The stars, one by one, let go of their posts, and the air, still cool with the breath of night, starts to move again. But it is not the people who stir first. It is the animals. The horses rise with the light. Not all at once. Not in alarm. But gradually. Shaking off the cold from their coats. Snorting gently into the wind. They walk a little. Stretching legs stiff from rest. Some nudge one another. A quiet social ballet that reorders the herd without a sound. Their movement is the alarm clock. A sound not of clamor, but of rhythm returning. Goats shift in clusters, their bells soft and irregular. Dogs stretch long across the dirt, yawning with toothy mouths before trotting off to check the edges of the camp. Within the tents, blankets are folded, not in haste, but as part of the morning's first meditation. The fire is coaxed back to life, not built anew but rekindled. Its embers still holding the memory of yesterday's flame. A pot is set on the hearth. Water, then milk. The day's first nourishment prepared with slow hands and practiced motions. No one rushes. No one shouts. Time is kept not by bells, but by the sun on the grass. The way the light touches the horses' backs. The way the shadows shorten and drift. Children wake when they wake. Their dreams fading into the soft murmur of morning voices. They rise with tangled hair and sleepy feet, stepping outside into a world they already understand. And the elders? They'd been awake, not moving, but watching, eyes calm, hands folded, waiting for the day to greet them. By the time the full sun is up, the camp is moving, not noisily, not with fanfare, but like a tide returning to shore. Gradual, natural, necessary. And in that motion, the circle of life reasserts itself. Gently, completely. A new day has begun. And with it, the long road waits. But before the ride, before the decisions and the distance, there is this. A morning shared with animals and sky, with steam rising from tea, and the soft sound of hooves, marking the beginning of motion. To leave the camp is not to abandon it. It is to take it with you. On the step, nothing is built to last in place, but everything is made to last in motion. And so, when the day's ride begins, The world the Mongols built the night before is quietly, patiently taken apart. There are no alarms, no orders barked through the cold air, only hands that know what to do, and bodies that move without needing direction. The fire is allowed to die on its own. Its ashes are scattered with a twist of a boot. The blackened stones lifted, cooled, and packed away. The tents, those rounded jars, are unhooked, their felt coverings folded with care. Their wooden frames collapsed into bundles of poles, lashed tightly with strips of hide. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forgotten. Even the cords that tied the door flaps are coiled in silence and stowed for the next night's shelter. Cooking pots are wiped clean, not scrubbed. The trace of soot left like a memory on metal that has fed 10 generations. Blankets are shaken out into the breeze, folded tightly, then tied to saddlebags with motions passed down through time. Children gather dung for the next evening's fire. It goes into sacks, alongside grain, cloth, and herbs picked in the margins of yesterday's trail. The circle unwinds, but never chaotically. Even the way the horses are loaded follows a pattern, a kind of unwritten architecture, shaped by repetition and need. The lightest frames go first, then the heaviest bundles, then the youngest children, tucked among the felt. Everyone plays a part. A boy no older than 10 leads a goat to the front of the herd. An elder checks the sky for signs of rain, lips barely moving, as he hums a tune no one else can hear. And when it is done, when the last rope is tied, when the last track has been erased, you can look behind and see almost nothing, just grass, as it was before. Because the Mongols do not impose themselves on the land. They pass through it. They build the world each night, and dismantle it each morning, not with sorrow, not with hurry, but with the deep understanding that nothing meant to endure can stay still. Long after the last hoofprint fades, long after the camp has vanished into motion, something remains behind, a faint haze, hovering just above the grass, a memory in motion, dust, not the choking kind found on crowded roads, but a finer, older kind, the kind that rises from the earth when hundreds of horses move as one, the kind that doesn't settle quickly. This dust has seen things. It knows the path of the horde. It carries with it the scent of sweat, of hide, of fire, smoke clinging to wool and leather. It is not stirred by wind alone, but by movement, intentional, steady, unrelenting. The Mongols do not leave behind stone towers, or burning wreckage in every place. Often, all they leave is this, the silence of absence, and the dust that lingers too long. For those who watch from the edge, traders, villagers, scouts, this is the first sign. Before a rider appears, before a bowstring twangs in the wind, they see the dust, low at first, like a line drawn across the earth, but rising slowly, growing broader, darker, closer, and with it comes unease. Not because the dust brings death, not always, but because it brings change. Once the horde has passed, nothing remains the same. Laws bend, borders shift, allegiances are tested. Some places fall, some rise. The dust does not announce its verdict. It merely drifts, settling on things that were certain yesterday. To the Mongols themselves, the dust is hardly noticed. It's part of the ride, part of the rhythm of leaving. They wipe it from their eyes, without thinking, brush it from their sleeves, without ceremony. But for others, for those behind, it is a message, a warning, a mark of passage. In this dust is the sound of hooves, the breath of horses, the low hum of voices speaking a language most will never understand. It is not just physical, it is emotional, a stirring of something old, deep, restless, And even when the dust fades from the air, it clings in the corners of thought, in the grooves of memory, because the horde moves on. But what it changes does not. There are towns marked on old maps, names in faded ink, placed beside winding rivers, and at the edges of ancient roads. Some of these towns still exist, others do not, and some exist in name only, because once the horde passed through, they were never quite the same. These were not always towns of great pride or power. Often they were quiet places, markets for grain, rest stops for caravans, villages where the pace of life moved with the rhythm of the seasons. They had walls, yes, but not strong ones. They had guards, but not trained ones. When news of the Mongols came, it came as rumor first, a traveler with dust on his cloak, a whisper carried down from the north. They are coming. And with that whisper, something shifted. Shutters were bolted. Grain was buried. Gates were reinforced with whatever wood could be found. Children were told not to wander. But sleep no longer came easily, even when the danger was days away, even when no hoofbeats could yet be heard. The minds of the townspeople had already been breached. The nights became long. The wind, once familiar, felt colder, more distant. And then, in time, the scouts arrived, or the first arrow, or simply nothing at all. Just the sound of horses. So many horses, rolling in like weather. That cannot be stopped. Sometimes the town resisted. Sometimes it surrendered. But the outcome was rarely gentle. Those who lived remembered the fire. Or worse, the silence after the fire. They remembered how quickly the gate fell, how swiftly the markets turned to ash, how the songs they once sang in the square no longer belonged in the air. Even if the town was spared, even if it was left standing, the memory of threat remained. A tension in the streets, a watchfulness in every meal, an unease permanent and patient, like dust that had settled in the seams of daily life. Towns like these learned to rebuild, but never to forget. They lit lamps earlier, spoke in lower tones, kept horses saddled, just in case. Children were told stories not of saints, but of speed, of flight, of how close they had come. And when travelers passed through, they noticed it. A certain hush at sundown, a glance toward the horizon. Even when the sky was clear, the town still stood. But it had changed its shape. It had learned to live with memory, to carry it quietly, like a scar no longer painful, but still present. And so these towns never truly slept again. Not deeply, not fully, because once the dust of the horde has passed, its echo stays in the bones of the land. Most roads begin with footsteps, a shepherd's trail, a merchant's shortcut, a path worn slowly by repetition. But the roads that followed the Mongols began not with footsteps, but with hooves. Fast, purposeful, unrelenting. The Mongols did not pave roads. They did not carve them in stone, nor mark them with signs. They left them by riding the same lines through the same valleys, again and again, until the land itself remembered. In time, others followed. Traders noticed the grooves in the grass. They saw where fires had burned before, where ashes still lingered in the soil, and they took those routes, not out of fear, but out of wisdom, because if the Mongols had passed through, the way was likely clear, clear of ambush, clear of heavy brush, clear of delay. These roads stretched wide, from the forests of Siberia to the mountains of Persia, from the Yellow River to the edges of the Black Sea. They were not roads in the traditional sense. They were patterns, fluid, shifting, adjusted with the seasons and the herds, yet always returning to the same arteries of movement. Along them grew way stations, small outposts where messengers could change horses, where tired riders could rest without dismounting. These were the lifelines of empire, the silent scaffolding of a world in motion. And the messengers themselves, the Ortage system, became like wind, unseen, but deeply felt. A rider could carry a message across thousands of miles, in a matter of days, not because he was swift alone, but because the road carried him, because someone before him had known where the water was, where the shelter stood, where the danger slept. And so, without ceremony, the Mongols had drawn a map across the known world, not with ink, but with presence. Merchants came next, then pilgrims, then diplomats from distant kingdoms, who spoke of silk and salt, of gold and tribute, but also of the roads they never would have taken, had not the riders come first. It is easy to think of empire as conquest, as the clang of swords, and the crush of stone. But sometimes, empire is a path, soft beneath the hooves, traced by invisible lines, leading farther than anyone imagined. And long after the riders had vanished into history, the roads remained, still followed, still traveled, not because they were built, but because they were proven. Where the Mongols passed, languages mingled like rivers, not all at once, not loudly, but in fragments carried on the wind, in trade, in whispers, in songs heard once and remembered forever. The steppe itself spoke in many tongues: Turkic, Mongolic, Persian, Chinese, Tibetan, and others with no name on maps, but alive in lullabies, and greetings passed from rider to rider. The horde moved through all of them, not by flattening difference, but by learning. Mongol leaders, khans, generals, envoys, did not demand that others forget their speech. They asked instead, "What do you call this? How do you say that? Who is your god? And what language does he use?" It was not kindness. It was utility. To govern a world this wide, you needed translators, scribes, mediators, and so every great camp had them. Men and women who could shift between languages, like fingers plucking strings, softly, fluidly, without friction. They translated not just words, but customs, weights and measures, laws, dreams. When an emissary arrived from Delhi or Constantinople, he was heard, not because the Mongols already spoke his tongue, but because someone nearby did. And when the emissary left, he took new words with him. Mongol terms for war, for tribute, for justice. And sometimes, he took a lullaby too, along the Silk Road. You could hear this blending. A market where a Chinese merchant haggled in Persian, a Sogdian scribe translating a Tibetan prayer, for a Mongol officer who only nodded silently. No one called it strange. It was simply how the world worked now. Even the messages of war, carried by swift riders across continents, were written in many scripts. A decree from the Khan might carry 5 seals, 5 alphabets, and 5 intentions, all tied together by one unshakable order. And in the dust of these roads, in the camps that rose and fell each night, language settled, not as conquest, but as memory. A child who had never seen Baghdad might still know 3 words in Arabic. A trader who'd never left the steppe might count his coins in Chinese. And even now, centuries later, the traces remain. Words in unexpected places, scripts that borrowed from scripts, names that crossed mountains and stayed. Because when the Mongols passed, they did not erase languages, they carried them. And in the dust they left behind, the tongues still whisper, if you listen carefully, beneath the wind. When the horde had passed, when the last hoofbeat vanished beyond the horizon, when the last fire smoke faded from the sky, what remained was not just silence. It was a different kind of quiet. not emptiness, but presence, not absence, but what remains after motion. The world the Mongols touched did not go back to what it had been. It could not. For a time, the ground still remembered the weight of their horses. The walls of towns leaned in slightly, as if still listening for an order. And the people, those who lived, carried it in their posture. There were new laws now, sometimes just, sometimes cruel, but always clear. And they had come not with speeches, but with action. A decree might arrive by horseback, delivered by a man who spoke no words but waited for your seal. And once opened, the decree was law. No grand procession, no applause, just understanding. Power had passed through here, and in its wake, things were reordered. Borders softened, languages crossed paths, traditions were reshaped quietly, like sand shifting under a new wind. It was not always peace, but it was not chaos either. Markets returned first, then the storytellers, then the travelers with tales of distant cities, saying, "There, too, they came. There, too, the streets changed." People built again, but differently, less vertically, more cautiously. They still sang at night, but their songs paused in new places. And even years later, when all that was visible had faded, when the roads were no longer marked, when the names of the Khans had blurred into history, something remained. A quiet, the kind that doesn't come from silence, but from certainty, from the knowledge that power, true power, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it moves quickly, then leaves space behind it, for the world to breathe differently. That was the Mongol gift, and the Mongol burden, to move so swiftly, to reshape so fully, and then to vanish, without needing to stay. And in the fields where they once rode, where only grass now moves in the wind, the quiet still lingers, not mournful, not triumphant, just still, as if the land itself is remembering. Imagine waking before the sun, not in a warm bed, but in the thin stillness of a high plateau, where the earth is hard, and the air is sharper than anything you've ever breathed. You reach for your boots, left beside the fire that died in the night, only to find them stiff with frost, the leather unforgiving, the laces frozen. There is no time to stretch, no space for complaints, because the camp is already in motion, and you, if you were one of them, would be too. The saddle waits. It has no cushion, just wood and hide, worn to your shape, if you've earned it. But this is your first day, and your body is soft, your thighs unused to long rides, your spine too upright, your hands too clean. The horse doesn't know you. It snorts as you approach, its breath steaming like smoke in the icy morning. You mount clumsily. There's no time for training. You must keep up or fall behind, and no one waits for the fallen. The cold beneath you bites, not just at your hands, but at your insides. A kind of cold that settles in your chest, and doesn't leave, even after you've ridden for hours. Your cloak flaps in the wind, but it doesn't warm you. Your ears ache, your fingertips burn, then go numb. You glance around. No one else complains, not the man beside you, who rode 300 miles the week before, not the child ahead of you, no older than 10, guiding a small herd across the ridge with quiet confidence. You try to shift your weight in the saddle, but it's no use. There's no relief. The horse moves steadily, up hills, across frozen riverbeds, down slopes slick with wind-hardened snow. There are no stops, only brief moments to drink from a leather pouch of sour mare's milk. No taste of comfort, only fuel, and then back into the ride. You begin to lose feeling in your lower back. Your shoulders tighten. Your breath comes in short bursts. But the horizon offers no break, just more step, More sky. More cold. And still, the others ride. Not faster than you. Just longer. Without pause. This is not the cold of winter in the city. It is not the chill you complain about before stepping inside. This cold follows you. Lives in you. Challenges your place on the horse. Your strength. Your reason for riding at all. And if you fall, if your body gives out, if you slip and the herd moves ahead, there is no warmth behind you, only wind and silence. Because the Mongol does not stop for weakness. The cold is part of the test. And you, on your first day, are not ready. By midday, your body is no longer yours. It moves out of habit, not will. The ache in your legs is no longer sharp. It's become something deeper, duller. A hum in the bones. But worse than the fatigue is the hunger. You thought you knew hunger. Skipping breakfast. A long day at work. A missed meal before sleep. But here, on the open steppe, where you've burned thousands of calories, before the sun reaches its peak, hunger becomes something else. It is not just a signal. It is not just emptiness. It is a presence. A thing inside you. Gnawing slowly. Relentlessly. Without sympathy. There is no packed lunch. No pause for stew or bread. The food comes only when it comes. And when it does, you may not want it. A scrap of dried meat. Too tough for your teeth. But softened slightly by the ride. A handful of clotted milk curds. Sour and chalky. A strip of fat scraped from a goat. Chewy, oily. And nearly frozen. There is no ceremony. No warmth. No pleasure. You eat because you must. Not because it fills you. But because without it, you will falter. Around you, the others chew in silence. Their faces betray no discomfort. No one asks if you are satisfied. No one notices if you are not. There are no second portions. No comfort foods. No complaints. If you are sick, you are expected to ride. If you cannot swallow, you are expected to try. Because hunger is not the exception here. It is part of the structure. A hunger not just for food, but for movement, for conquest, for survival. And if your body weakens, if your vision begins to blur, if your stomach churns from the strange milk, if your breath comes ragged, you learn a hard truth. No one will stop the ride to tend to your weakness. Not because they are cruel, but because they cannot afford to be soft. The steppe does not wait, and neither does the horde. So you ride, and you chew, and you drink what is handed to you, no matter the taste. And when the sun begins to lower, when your hands tremble and your gut still aches, you will not rest. Not yet, because rest must be earned. And hunger is just one more thing you must learn to ride through. At first, it's your muscles that protest. Your thighs burn. Your shoulders throb. Your hands, gripping the reins, always begin to stiffen and blister. You shift your weight in the saddle. You stretch your neck. You roll your wrists. But it doesn't help. Because the pain that greets you out here is not a passing ache. It's not soreness after exercise, or the dull fatigue of a long day standing. It goes deeper. This is pain that settles in the bone. Your spine bends to the will of the ride. Not once or twice, but over and over, until it forgets how to be upright. The saddle does not forgive your shape. It does not cushion or support. It demands, and if you cannot meet its demand, it leaves its mark. The rhythm of the gallop. Beautiful to watch. Brutal to endure. Each hoofbeat sends a shock through your body. Not like a bruise, but like a vibration. You can't quiet. By the second day, your knees no longer feel like your own. The joints swell. But silently. You say nothing. Because no one else says anything. The others ride as if carved from the same wood as their bows. Their backs never bend. Their eyes never water. But look closer, and you'll see the truth. That man's jaw is clenched. That woman's fingers are split at the knuckles. That boy, barely old enough to lift a sword, walks as if every step pulls him sideways. They feel it too, but they've learned not to show it. Because on the step, pain is part of the uniform. It is expected. It is earned. If your bones grind, good. If your feet go numb, better. If your skin splits beneath the sun and wind, it means you're learning. And if you complain, you don't belong. There are no healers riding behind you. No soft hands to cradle your joints. No balm to ease your aches. You must ride through it, or fall away. That is the choice. And that is why you would not survive a day. Not because of the hunger. Not because of the cold. But because of the pain that doesn't speak loudly, yet never stops speaking. The pain that lives not in the skin, but in the marrow. Quiet. Heavy. Permanent. The kind of pain that shapes a people. If you were to ride among them, if, by some chance, you endured the cold, the hunger, the ache that creeps into your bones, you would face another wall, a quieter one, harder to see, impossible to climb. Discipline. Not the kind that shouts commands, not the kind marked by drill formations or polished armor, but the deep, internal kind, the kind that watches itself. Always. In the Mongol horde, every man is his own officer. There is no margin for laziness, no space for forgetfulness. You are expected to remember, to know, to act, without hesitation, without being told. The bowstring must be oiled. The quiver must be tied just so. Your horse must be brushed, checked for sores, fed before you feed yourself. No one reminds you. If you forget, you suffer. And the horde does not pause to accommodate your error. A single lapse in preparation can unravel the rhythm of 100 riders. A dropped strap, a twisted girth, a mispacked satchel. These are not small mistakes. They are signs of someone not yet ready to be trusted. Even your posture is part of the discipline. Slouch too long in the saddle, and your balance shifts. And if your balance shifts, your shot misses. And if your shot misses, a companion might die. It's all connected. This is not a camp of chaos. It is a choreography. Horses drink in order. Tents rise in a practiced shape. Children help before they're asked. And when the horn sounds, to ride, to regroup, to attack, there is no delay. Each rider knows their place, knows their unit, knows the hand signal in the dark. Because disobedience is not just frowned upon. It is dangerous. In battle, if 10 men flee, all 10 may be executed. If a scout returns late, he may be sent back, alone, to prove his loyalty. This is not cruelty. It is survival. Because an army this mobile, this lean, this far from home, must function like a single living being. If one part stumbles, the whole body falls. And so they train, not just their arms, but their minds, to act before doubt, to endure before asking, to repeat without praise. If you joined them, you might think you could keep up. For a while, you might ride well, shoot straight, even bear the cold. But one moment, when your mind slips, when you forget to tie your horse just right, when you reach for water before your task is done, you'll feel it. The distance between surviving the day and truly belonging to it. Because for the Mongol, discipline is not effort. It is instinct. And you, still thinking of comfort, still waiting for permission, are not ready. When the sun begins to lower, you think, perhaps, you've made it. That this relentless day must now release you. That the long ride, the cold, the hunger, the ache in your spine, will finally give way to stillness. But it doesn't. Because on the steppe, the day does not end with the sun. There is no final bell. No warm bath. No firelit supper waiting with soft bread and quiet music. There is only continuation. You dismount, and the work begins. The horse must be rubbed down, fed, checked for wounds. You may be starving, but your mount comes first. Then your gear. Every buckle, every strap must be checked, coiled, tied, and readied for the next ride. Because if it rains in the night, or if the wind shifts, or if orders come before dawn, you must be able to move immediately, in silence. A tent, if it comes, is not a private retreat. It is shared, often crowded, thin against the wind. Its warmth comes from breath and habit. There is no pillow, no mattress, only a felt mat and whatever layers you still wear. Dinner, if there is one, is modest. Boiled meat, a broth with floating bits of bone, a skin of fermented mare's milk passed between hands. You eat quickly, quietly, gratefully. And still, the day is not over. There may be scouts to send, weapons to check, watches to assign. You're tired. So tired your body feels like stone. But you do not lie down just yet. You wait. Because the night may ask something more of you. And if it doesn't, if at last you are allowed to curl into yourself, beneath a rough wool blanket, beneath the stars that blaze uncaring above you, there is no promise of rest. Because sleep, too, is part of the endurance. You must rest lightly, ready to rise at any moment, ready to ride, and the cold returns. It seeps into your bones, just as it did in the morning, whispering, "You are not home. You are not safe. You are here, among them." And then the thought returns, the one you've carried since noon, since your first misstep, since the ache behind your eyes. You could not do this again, not another day. And yet, they will. The boy beside you, the woman with the bow, the man with the scar across his cheek. They will rise before the sun, again, and again, and again. Because for them, this is not endurance. This is life. A day that does not end, only repeats, until the world changes, or they change it. And you would not survive. Not because you are weak, but because they were something else entirely. And now, as the last hoofbeats fade into memory, as the wind softens and the sky turns silver, we return to stillness. You've traveled far tonight, not in miles, but in feeling, across the endless steppe, through bitter cold and quiet hunger, into the rhythm of a world so unlike our own, yet achingly human at its core. We met no kings and golden thrones, no gleaming towers or ballads of triumph. Instead, we found something more enduring. A people who lived through motion, who slept lightly under foreign stars, who carried discipline not as burden, but as breath. There were no soft places here, no room for sentiment or slowness. And yet, beneath the surface of endurance, we glimpsed something gentle. A child tending a horse in silence, a hand coiling a rope by moonlight, a fire kindled not for comfort, but for survival. The Mongol world was hard, unforgiving to the unready, merciless to the slow, but it was also ordered, intentional, and quiet in its strength. You would not have survived a day, not because you are less, but because they were shaped by a different truth. One written not in books, but in wind, and earth, and long, quiet rides, beneath a sky that never blinked. As you drift now toward sleep, let your breath slow. Let the cold of the steppe fall away. Let the dust settle. There is nothing more to do. No horn will sound. No fire needs tending. Only rest remains. And perhaps tomorrow, When you walk your own quieter path, you'll carry with you a trace, not of their conquest, but of their calm. That stillness after motion, that discipline without noise, that deep, unwavering pulse of a world that never needed to announce itself. Thank you for riding with me tonight. Until next time, sleep well and dream gently through history.